Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to day two of the first session of day two of the three-day festival. That's 1, 2, 3 for you. And we are delighted to have with us this morning Samir, Soni, Sidhartha, Mallya, and in conversation with the two of them is Acharya. Before I introduce the books, let me and the speakers, let me introduce, take the pleasure of introducing our moderator for this session. Acharya is the co-founder and CEO of Map My Genome, a company that pioneered preventive healthcare through genome-based personalized precision medicine. The company reaches customers through hospitals, through do-it-yourself analysis kits, and through counseling for lifestyle management. Most recently, Map My Genome has also been active in COVID testing with 3 approved labs, including one at the Rajiv Gandhi International Airport in Hyderabad. And she has been awarded, several times with, anything that you can think of, Tech Titan, Young Global Leader, and she has been Entrepreneur of the Year. She has received the Economic Times Award and so on and so forth. But what is more interesting, at least for us from the literary festival point of view, is that she not only contributes regularly science articles in journals and magazines, but she's also a published poet. She has a book of poems to her credit. So Anu, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I know these are not necessarily the best of times, and I'm sure you are very busy with the new variants coming up every day. And thank you for joining us this morning. And ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure to introduce to you two well-known personalities, Samir Soni and Sidhartha Mallya. Samir is, of course, as everybody knows, he's an award-winning actor, and he studied in Delhi and then Los Angeles, by the way, where Sidhartha is right now. And Samir has had a career on the Wall Street, and then he chugged it all to come to Bombay to become an actor. And over the last 20, 25 years, he has won several awards and recognitions, and his shows, both television and on OTT platforms, are very, very popular. But of course, here he's here today because he has written a marvelous book with a beautiful title. I mentioned this to him in the email, which is very evocative, and of course, my experiments, with silence, and of course, recalls Gandhi's autobiography. And Samir, of course, has been, many of you know, has been very vocal about the importance of mental health, and relooking at this whole concept called success. What is success? What constitutes success? And how do we deal with success, and so on. And so here today with us is Samir Soni with his book, My Experiments with Silence, The Diary of an Introvert. Just a little word or two about the book, because the conversation will tell you more about the book. But what is interesting is that public figures like Samir and Sidhartha are now writing openly and talking openly about mental health and so on, which I hope will bring this very important issue into the public arena for discussion and recognition. Samir's book raises very fundamental questions, about identity, about self-realization, questions like who am I, and why am I the way I am, and who is the real me, and all these questions. But please note that this is not one of those glib self-help motivational books, but actually a very sensitive account, because these are selections from his own diary. And so it's a very sensitive account of a man caught in a tug of war between the inner life and the external universe. So Samir, thank you very much, not only for writing this book, but agreeing to talk about it this morning with our viewers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. And our second guest, ladies and gentlemen, this morning is Sidhartha Mallya, who is, of course, well known as an actor, as a model, and he studied acting at University of London. And of course, you all know his association with the Royal Challengers Bangalore IPL team, which was owned at that time by his father. And today he's here to talk to us about his recent book, again, a memoir, and it's titled If I'm Honest. And let me tell you, it is nothing but, honest. The entire book is very, very honest confession in a way of his own problems with OCD, with depression, anxiety, and also, the impact of his parents' divorce on him, and so on. And many of you may have seen his videos on the YouTube, on Instagram. I'm sorry because I don't, use any of these social handles. So really, I'm not very familiar with this. But I checked, and his Instagram posts very interestingly titled "Consider This," and of course the Sid is in all caps, which of course is a self-referential title. And these videos have received tremendous response, particularly from the young people who are watching these programs and seeing, this very successful man talk about, his problems with mental issues. So the reason why we thought this is a wonderful session, particularly in these times when the pandemic has really affected all of us and brought to the fore the issue of mental health, is because here are two very successful people, talking about this very important issue in the public domain. And so, ladies and gentlemen, probably I've taken far too long to introduce our speakers and our moderator, but I thought, it's very important that we know the speakers as well as the books before we launch into the session. And without any further ado, I hand over the session to Anu with just a rider that I'll be back on the screen about 35 minutes into the session with the audience questions. Thank you so much. And once again, thank you all of you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much, Professor Vijay. It is a pleasure to do this. If I'm honest, I've not done this with Bollywood actors. I'm quite used to moderating sessions with scientists and other people. So I think this will be my first in this space. But welcome, Sidhartha or Sid and Samir. I've seen a lot of your work. So let me get started saying that, in the last 2 years of the pandemic, mental health has been brought to the fore. And I think if you take data from whether it is the total brain mental health index, we see a drastic rise in the number of cases. And the uncertainty that COVID has brought in has been such a key stressor, and that has allowed to see a ginormous rise in cases and the need to resort to mental health solutions. So I'm really, really thankful for people like both of you, Samir and Sid, that you've been able to bring in such incredible stories of your own personal stories to the fore, because I think it is no longer something that's is very prescriptive and is a should-do list, but it was very, very heartwarming because I could read both the books in one sitting alone, and I could find it it is relatable, it is very readable, and it is very, very personal, and it is something that I'm sure a lot of people will find a lot of help in by reading it. Now, I must say that I'm aware that there are multiple factors that are involved in mental health, which include genetics, it includes environment, includes stress, and like any physical disease, I think mental health also has biological pathways, and it's important to identify and get treated. And in many ways, I think when you hear of this story that the mind and the body is one, I think what we are finding now is that anything that is a physical disease can get manifested into a mental disease and vice versa. So you treat one, you're treating the other as well. So I think we're keeping that in mind. I think, and both of you have referenced this, that you want to know yourself, and understanding of yourself was key. So let me start off first, Samir, by asking you that, I read that you were an M&A investment banker, and you decided to move into acting. So what made you make that move from being a banker to an actor?
Well, firstly, I'd like to thank Professor Vijay for this eloquent introduction. Thank you very much. Thanks for his kind words. To me, the switchover was that I had wanted to be an actor. I discovered acting when I was about 8 years old or 9 years old. And being an introvert that I was, to me, it was sort of a catharsis to be on stage, to be somebody else as opposed to be me. And through the character, express my real feelings and emotions, which made life very easy for me, because otherwise I would not be able to communicate. So that was the background that I always knew this is where I wanted to be, because that was the platform which made me happy. But as coming from a middle class Indian family, academics, is always important. So I did my undergrad in finance, and I found myself on Wall Street. And that was probably one of the highest paying jobs one could get living in Manhattan. And I was miserable. So I was the envy of, like, a lot of my friends and family members were so excited for me, everyone except me. And I was like, God, so I kind of thought that if this is sort of the pinnacle of the journey I'm going to take, or the start of a journey, and I'm miserable, there is something fundamentally wrong, right? So obviously, because it's the highest paying job you can get, you're living in a lovely place, and if that's not making you happy, then you need to question the path you're taking. So I came to the realization. So at that time, I was questioning myself. Look, what do you really want to do? Because if this is not making you happy, and I've been working on the Wall Street for just a couple of years. So I kind of did introspection, and I said, okay, look, what I really want from life, in terms of professionally at least, was I want to do something that I wouldn't mind even if I wasn't paid for it. That was my first criteria. That was a realization I had when I was in my early 20s. And yeah, something that I would stay up all night looking forward to. And that was acting for me at that point in time. That seemed to answer all my questions, because it was something that was denied to me, or I was doing it amateurly, in amateur stage theater. I was doing reading classes at NYU. So I said, if that's what you really want, and that was a big decision, then I said, look, I remember writing a letter to my father and saying, look, Dad, I don't want to be 45 years old with a wife and 2 kids, and just bore the hell out of them, telling them that I could have been a very successful actor, just that I didn't have enough courage to do so. So yeah, I just chucked up my job and came back to India. And then no one from my family has anything to do with acting or Bollywood. I'm from Delhi. So in fact, when I came back, that was the first time I came to Mumbai. So yeah, so I think it was the circumstances. And that actually, normally, and I'm sure Sidhartha will agree with that, normally what happens is a saying that universe says, if I didn't make you uncomfortable, you would not move. Right? So only when you hit a situation in which you're uncomfortable, that you kind of wonder that, okay, now I need to fix this. There's something wrong. So that's so I was fortunate to get that job, which was so extreme for me that I put me on my at that time what seemed to be the correct path.
And Sidhartha, is that the case for you as well, that you got uncomfortable, or how did you make that?
Yeah, it's firstly, thank you for having me here, and hi to everyone watching from home. Listening to Samir just now, it was almost as if I was hearing my own journey as well. I think it's almost parallel, except I came to India and then left, as opposed to the other way around like Samir. But it was the same thing for me, I mean, being born into the family that I was, it was always an expectation, I guess, and always spoken to me that I'm going to end up in the family business, even though, I've been brought up in England my whole life. So for all intensive purposes, I was a Brit. I grew up there, went to boarding school when I was 10, university, studied business at university, worked for a year in the UK, then came back to India, being groomed into this life, which I guess I never really questioned, because it had just, it was just, the grandfather did it, the dad did it, so I would do it, right? But then in my years in India, I was miserable, like Samir said, and I think a lot more people than they let on to are miserable. But a lot of people don't then, I don't want to say courage, because, you know, you've got to have the support and the means to be able, you know, Samir, I'm sure would agree as well. We were both fortunate to be able to go and pursue something that we both enjoyed as well. And for me, that was the case. You know, I was in India for, I think it was 2010 to 12, about 2 years, but it was difficult. I was a fish out of water. You know, for all intents and purposes, I was a Brit in India, thrown into the spotlight, into this world that, you know, I'd had fleeting glimpses of when I'd come in the holidays and stuff like that. But I was used to being in the UK, and I just, you know, I don't think it suited me, the, you know, sitting behind a desk for 8 hours a day. I mean, I can hardly sit still for 8 minutes. So put me behind a desk for 8 hours, it was miserable. And similarly, like Samir, I had a chat with my dad, and I said, look, this just isn't what I want to do. And I think I was 24 at the time, 2012 it was, so 10 years ago, I was 24. And I was like, it's just not what I want to do. And the thought of doing that for the rest of my life was something that I was like, yeah, and I remember exactly what I said to him. I said, look, your father started off this business and grew it huge. You've taken it on and made it even bigger. I just don't think I'll personally be able to grow the company the same way you did, not because I don't have the ability, but I just don't have the desire. And I think that's paramount in anything in life, right? Is that you can be the most talented person in the world at whatever you do, but if you don't have the passion to do it, success is always going to be limited. And he actually kind of gave me his blessing, which is great, which again is not something that, you know, all Indian men, fathers would necessarily do. So I do give him a lot of credit for that. And again, with the acting thing, I'm an only child. Parents got divorced when I was very young. So I've always been used to kind of like escaping into my own imaginary world and creating characters and things like that. And that's, I guess, it's always sort of like been in me. And it was, I guess, like Samir said, owning my authenticity and being like, you know, this is what I want to do, and let's see where it goes.
So I mean, one of my favorite authors is Dr. Seuss, and he says, you know, why fit in when you were born to stand out, right? So why is it that, you know, when we are given these books when we're kids, that we're supposed to stand out? Why is it that there is this expectation, and both of you mentioned that there's an expectation setting that society and your family did? And I remember, Sid, in your book, you mentioned that except your father, there were still other people who still had this expectation out of you. And Samir, you mentioned that courage is one of the things, but are there anything else that is needed for someone who is, let's say, some other reader who's sitting, who wants to make that leap into getting out of what he is currently in a profession and coming there? Is there something else that any one of you would like to add, that how do you break away from that mold of expectation setting and become a more authentic self of who you want to be?
Oh, okay, I'll take that. I think the first thing is you need to know yourself, whether before you know you're authentic or not authentic. You have to know what is intrinsically you and what is the conditioning you've got. I think in today's day and age, what we suffer from, because your personality is pretty much formed by the age of 7. Okay, so because that's the time you deal with your first real relationship in life or in the world, and that's with your parents. And then you use that as a map for pretty much rest of your life until you question that and saying, for example, for me, the thing was validation. So like, and unfortunately in the education system is such, we are taught to come first, to be the best, to be good, give you 100%. And I don't see any intrinsic value in that, because success somehow is equated to happiness, although they have nothing to do with each other. I mean, it's like, and maybe we are you know, paying the price for the experiences of our earlier generation, right? Because they probably didn't have it all, and they thought the most important thing was education, making money, being the best. Now we are privileged in that sense that these basic necessities are taken care of. Now the question is, what about me? What do I want? Right?
Yeah.
To me, that deconditioning is extremely important. For example, I keep saying that there's so much of people are harping about success, and I hate that word really, because if you were to take the most successful, say, pop icon we've had, could be Elvis, could be Michael Jackson, you would consider them the greats. But would you want to lead that life? Would you want their life? And chances are 99.9% will say, heck no. I don't want to be dead by 50 with drugs or whatever. So I think we are sold a wrong dream. And we somehow implicitly follow it, thinking that's going to lead us to that holy grail. And when you get there, you say, wait a minute, I'm not happy. Well, that's because you were doing the things for the wrong reason, because that's how you were conditioned. So you have to really, and there, I think that relationship or your growing years are important, and also society. Everyone, 100 years back, we probably talk about Mother Teresa or Mahatma Gandhi or somebody else. Now we talk about Steve Jobs. Who were the top, richest guys, or have this and have that, as if that somehow translates into happiness. If that was the case, any person who is financially well off or is famous or whatever would be the happiest man in the world. And we know for a fact that's not true. So I think it's the conditioning, and you need to know who you are to discover yourself and why you do what you do. That to me is paramount. Just not knowing what you want to do is enough. But why do you want it? Are you still looking for validation? And then you need to fix yourself. So I think that's my take on that.
Yeah, I think, I'd add to that. I'd speak more kind of to the younger generation, which is there's such a pressure for kids to have their stuff figured out at such a young age. And it's impossible. And the other thing is that I know the standards in India are so much higher than anywhere else in the world. I was talking to someone not too long ago, and she's 40 now, and she's doing higher education. She's going to do another course, and she got 70% in an exam, and she's like, I failed. I said, 70% is a fail. I said, if I was studying back then, I would have the levels of the pressure put on kids today. There was this whole college admission scandal in the US last year or the year before or whatever. Why is that though? It's because the pressure these youngsters are being put on to get into the top schools, to do this, because I think that elder generation still has this idea of what success should look like. Success looks like my daughter going to an Ivy League school. Success looks like my son becoming a doctor, that sort of stuff. Now, if you look at, in the UK, right, the system, you have your GCSEs, you have your AS levels, you have your A levels kind of thing. So, and then you go to university. So if you want to, let's just say, be a doctor, you want to have a career as a doctor. Okay, well then, to be a doctor at the age of 18, you have to take certain science. You have to do biology, you have to have physics to get into medical school at 18, right? In order to be able to do biology and physics and science and all this stuff at 18, you have to have done it for your GCSEs, which is at 16. You have to choose your subjects for your GCSE at 14. How can a 14-year-old know what they want to do for the rest of their life? And why then should they be tied down to doing that? The flexibility to change and to chop and change. Like Samir said, he was in his mid to early 20s when he decided to make a career change. I was in my mid to early 20s as well. That's not old. That's young. That's young. And to put pressure on people to have stuff figured out by that age, I just think we're putting too much pressure on people. And then what happens is they feel handcuffed. Like, I'm in my lane now. If I deviate from this lane, I'm failing, which isn't the case at all. You're not failing. Being flexible with yourself is not failing. You tried it. It didn't work out. You try something else. And I think we need to get away from that idea that, you're a failure just because you don't decide to go through with what you decided when you were 12.
Absolutely. So let me move on to something which I guess in some ways, I also write in rhyme, and I found both of you writing in rhyme a lot of between the lines, in your books. Can you recite and maybe show a little bit the cover of your book and maybe recite your favorite rhyme in each one of your books? Which one that is and why is that a favorite rhyme? Or maybe it's favorite for right now. But
Sidhartha, you want to go first? You want me to do it?
Yeah, I can go first. So here's my book, if I'm honest. The slightly better kept picture on the front. One thing I want to say just on this topic about the cover, right? And this is something important. I think that the cover process was actually my favorite part of working with the designers. And I was adamant on it being orange because orange is my favorite color. And it was something that was going to make me happy. And I think it's little things in life that we can do for ourselves to make us happy, where we don't always have to be doing something for something else. So even the cover on this book, I thought was important, that, you know, it's my story, so I'm going to do something that makes me happy. But in terms of rhymes, actually this book doesn't have any rhymes as in poems, but I do and if I'm honest, poetry series on Instagram. And God, now you put me on the spot. I've forgotten.
No, we will go to Samir and come back if it is okay.
Yeah, come back to me in a second.
Okay.
My line.
Yeah, well, firstly, gotta show the book cover. Okay.
I love both your covers. They were both very, very appealing. So even though I've read the electronic version, I think I would pick up both your books.
Mine is literally in a diary format. It's literally pages from my diary. I mean, these were the moments when I was going through. So I think as opposed to hindsight, it was because some of that stuff is 10 years back when I was going through this turmoil and dealing with the situation, which I thought was very relevant today. And then we kind of made a book around it and, you know, give it some context and stuff. On the contrary, I also had fun with the cover, but I was like torn to have whether have my picture on it or not, because my wife insisted I should. And I wasn't too sure, because then you'll say, hey, people who know you would get it. I say, hey, man, that also would deter people who do not know me. I'll say, oh, one might want to buy that book. You know, some Bollywood guy's written some, you know, stuff about himself. So I was trying to, you know, So anyway, we settled for this. In terms of, there's a fair bit of poetry in this. And I don't consider myself a poet, but I can rhyme a word or two. So the one I think which sort of comes towards the end, which was sort of the realization that I said, okay, this was it. It's called The Circle. So this probably, I know it honestly by heart. It says, round and round I go, through the same places I've been before. The same highs, the same lows, the same uncertainties, the same unsures. Will I, won't I, can I, can't I? How many times the same fears must face I? And will there be an end? Will I see some light? Will there be an end to this dreary dark night? In search of that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, round and round and round I go. That was sort of
beautiful.
I think we all are kind of dealing the same situations, and we're hoping to reach that one moment where everything makes sense and there's clarity of purpose and everything. But we actually are going in circles.
Nice.
So that Sidhartha, there is no pressure for you to.
No, I've got it. I've got it.
Okay.
I've got it. So this is from one of my chapters in the book is called Depressed to Blessed, right? And it's my experience of going from depression to feeling blessed. And I did that, the rhyme about it, very Dr. Seuss-esque, because I'm very big on rhyming poems. So this piece was about, it was my confession about being depressed and how it affected me. And then I end it by saying, why did I do this? So I said, so the poem then ends with, so I talk about my experience and then I go, so that's my confession about depression. Why do I share it? What's the lesson? Well, more than anything, it's just to say it's fine to admit to not feeling okay. You have a right to feel the way that you do, happy and glad, but sad and mad too. Because great friends and family, success and wealth don't make you immune to issues of mental health. It can affect us all, no matter who we are, from the man on the street to the world's biggest star. It doesn't discriminate, so don't do what I did. Beat yourself up in a hope to get rid of the feelings you're feeling and what you're going through. You are human and have a right to feel the way that you do. So I'll leave you with this before I go. To all of you who suffer, know you're not alone. You are seen, you're acknowledged. You for sure aren't on your own. So take your rightful place, sitting proudly on your throne.
Amazing.
And it's so funny what Samir said about putting his picture on the front of the book and people automatically then judging, being like, oh, this is a Bollywood actor. What does he have to say? Why should I buy his book? And that was one of the main messages I wanted to get across in my book, is that no matter who you are, rich, poor, famous, not famous, male, female, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Jewish, Indian, Pakistani, Israeli, whatever. Mental health doesn't discriminate. And we shouldn't judge people based on, oh, Samir's a Bollywood star. Well, what does he have to say? I mean, you know, and that's sadly what people do. But I think if we can get over that and realize that within we're all the same and everyone has a right to feel, then that might give people, I'd say, more permission to feel what they're going through.
So I'll be honest, I read both your books and then I saw your work, some of the movies that you acted in and all. So I think for me, it was a better way to know you before seeing some of the other movies that you've done or other things. And I think I think many people will pick it up for that, right? And I'm sure that these books would be something that a friend would recommend to a friend would recommend to a friend. So I think, yes, the covers are both beautiful, but people will read it because of the content and because of the ability of what the content does to them. So I was talking to actually a neurosurgeon, and one of the things I was asking him is that, you know, how do people identify that, you know, what happens in a mental health situation? Every one of us has gone through that in some way or the other, right? And I know both of you have mentioned this in your books, but I want to understand that when it comes to identifying the stressors that have caused you to either, you know, feel a certain way or to become anxious or to go a certain way, what is the one thing you did at that moment to be able to identify and be able to then say, this is how I can manage this better? And I know you have referenced this in your book, but it'll be nice to get a little glimpse of that.
Sidhartha, do you want to go?
Okay. So what is it really that I do to manage it? Is that sort of...
So when you are in that moment where your thoughts are going haywire, or, you know, you're getting those feelings, what did you do? I know you've started writing. You also mentioned meditation and a few other things.
Yeah. I think for me, the OCD has been one of my biggest, say problem, but, you know, one of the biggest things I've dealt with through my life, and it's a chronic condition. And I think the thing that helped me the most was actually learning about what OCD actually was. And I talk about in the book, I did this workbook that, you know, sort of helped me identify when the thoughts were coming, helped me identify my patterns of jumping into compulsive behavior to sort of stop these thoughts and everything. And really it was that awareness that was paramount for me, because I'm a believer that if you're not aware of something, it's as good as it either not existing, or you can't do anything about it, right? If you're not aware of it first. And what this workbook did was give me the understanding. It didn't stop it, right? And I think that's what a lot of the time what people have to expect is that, you know, with thoughts, anxiety, all of these things, it's always going to be there because it's part of being a human being. You can't stop thinking. I mean, if it was easy to choose exactly what thoughts came into our head, you know, we would, but we can't. And I think it was understanding that and realizing, okay, what do I have control over? What do I not have control over? I don't have control over my thoughts. I don't have control over my feelings. I don't have control over my sensations. But what I do have control over is my behavior in how I respond to these things. And that was really the most important thing for me, was now being able to identify, okay, that's an OCD thought. Before jumping straight into the compulsion, it's being like, okay, breathe, take a beat, and then, you know, do something else or find something.
As far as I was concerned, I was kind of, I guess, spiritually inclined, if one can say that. So, so I went through a phase in which my personal life and professional life was sort of in turmoil, and my world kind of fell apart. So the first thing I did was to practice silence, because I was reading so many books and everybody said, practice silence and be quiet for half an hour, at least try it. And that's why this book is the source of, and that's what happened, you know, and this is what is documented in that book, is that I would make a conscious effort, just put the clock there and for half an hour, just stare at it and not do anything. And the whole idea was not to be reactive to the thoughts that were going through your brain. That was this thing, because brain has a gazillion thoughts, because I think there's a sort of overemphasis on the brain, because I think your brain's sole purpose is to protect you and not to make you necessarily to make you happy. But we identify so much ourselves so much with the brain that we live by it. And if brain has its way, you would not do anything, because it's sort of collecting data of your experiences, and you're scared. It will remind you, hey, if you do this, this is going to go wrong. So one step was to deal with that, and I am not going to react. And slowly then the number of thoughts kind of slow down, because the brain kind of gives up, say, okay, this guy is not going to react. So that was one thing. And the second thing, obviously, I sought help immediately, because I was in so much of pain. And the worst thing is, I did not know why. I mean, that's the crazy part, right? You're like, man, this should not hurt me so much. If it's a broken relationship. I mean, you've had a relationship for 6 months and you're crying like you lost someone, like the world is falling apart. What's wrong? So to question that, so I did seek help, and I did not want to kind of brush it under the carpet. And that's why during the lockdown, a lot of people are coming up with it, because you have distractions, right? If you're dealing with something, okay, let's go catch a movie, or let's go for a drink or a party or something or the other, which takes away from what the issue might be. And so I kind of forced myself to say, okay, no, you're not running away with this. We need to get to the bottom of this. What is the issue? And to me, it was really quite simple, was that I was like an introvert. I was a classic introvert living in an extroverted world. But that's nothing wrong in that. But the problem is when you're made to feel that that is wrong, or you yourself feel, not to accuse anyone else, you feel there's something wrong with me, then that becomes a mental illness, right? So having an issue like having anxiety because, hey, you're an introvert, you're in an extroverted world, we live in an extroverted world, we go into an extroverted environment and you don't fit in. And then you say, man, what's wrong with me? So just to come to terms with the fact that I am an introvert, and we live predominantly in an extroverted world, everything that we value is extremely extroverted. Because it's something you can see in with bravery and success and blah blah blah, and an introvert would tend to be much more introspective, right? So it was sort of like self-acceptance. So I went to counseling immediately. I kept questioning myself. I think, why? And then I said, look, this is who I am. I gotta accept myself, because especially in the profession I was in. I mean, if I had to go out for a party or let's say a social gathering, man, since morning I'd have panic attacks. I'd be like, oh God, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna wear? And then you have to have these small conversations which seem more tedious than writing a book. So yeah, so identifying what the issue is and talking. I mean, I was, I still from off and on go seek help from counselor. I will talk, and just to find out what's going on. And then I think it's important to not brush it under the carpet and just kind of face it. So yeah.
Seeking help is an important aspect of
paramount, because actually, I'm sorry, because what happens is other people are not well equipped, because they really don't understand. If I tell someone who's never felt anxiety or panic, he would not know. He said, what do you mean you're feeling anxious? We're just going for a get together, a dinner. I said, but you don't understand. I mean, I'm not feeling comfortable, not feeling good. So normally, A, they don't understand, B, they're not qualified. So their answer is going to be, hey, you think too much, which is the most annoying thing you'll ever hear, which is like, yeah, man, as if I have a choice on this one. I really want to think. Hey, you think too much and then snap out of it. Oh, really? Wow, that's a good one. Never thought of that one. So people are just not qualified to really truly understand you. And you can't blame them. Either they're too close to you, they don't know what it means, and they run out of patience and say, come on, let's have a couple of beers, we'll be fine. So counseling, and then if you need to take medication to function normally, so be it.
You had mentioned silence, and I know a lot of people go to like a Vipassana or a workshop, which basically is you spend 7 or 10 days just doing just that. So have you also done things like that, or? No,
I've done. I've been to Bangalore. I did about like a 1-week course. But to me, that really wasn't, because to me, the idea was because the people are still around you. Mm-hmm. To me, silence meant isolation, which meant that you have nothing to deal with but your own thoughts. So I probably wouldn't even watch TV or meet my friends too much. And the only outlet I had was writing. And the biggest thing is, which is challenging, is you might be talking, but it is to counter the urges. For example, you're itching to pick up that phone and call someone, but you don't. And he said, okay, I will go when the drive or that obsession to do that goes away, because it will. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you hang in there, it will go away. So it's more of practicing that you are not a slave to your urges. So that is more important than just keeping quiet, because I've seen even body language, because where I went, there were people around. So you would kind of make eye contact and people around you and you feel comfortable. That's a sense of comfort to some degree. So the idea was nothing. It's, if I may indulge, can I read out something here? Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, that's sort of my epilogue for the book. I actually almost titled the book Walk the Mist, because mist was sort of symbolic of the illusions you have to fight. So as I said, searching for answers everywhere except where lie the solution. The key lies on the other side of the mist. Through the unknown, the unsafe. On the other side lies paradise, clarity of purpose, potential of true self, and true happiness. In between lie your worst fears, the fear of loneliness, the fear of being alone, no one to love or be loved by, the fear of being inconsequential, the fear of simply withering away unnoticed, let alone mourned, not belonging to anyone and no one belonging to you, no one in front, behind, or besides, only you and the rest of the world. Walking through this mist tears every pretense of self until you're left alone, unsheltered, unclothed, just the weak, timid, incomplete you. Yes, the mist is dark and dense. It is easier to run back to the security of the illusion, but beyond it is the paradise of your true perfect self. Have to have courage, have to walk the mist. So this kind of summarized to me what I was trying to do.
It's amazing. So I think given that said one thing that I read, and I'm sure when you talked about, Samir is talking about loneliness and all of that, I know you have a beagle, Duke.
Yeah, he's here somewhere.
And I have two. So
You do?
Yes. So how do you think that your companions like Duke and others have helped you through this journey? And is that something that you think others should consider when they are going through this path of finding themselves out?
Honestly, I think Duke's picture should have been on the front of my book, not mine, because he's everything. And I think I've had him now 8.5 years. And, I've always loved it, everything, but we just really bond, right? Especially during the pandemic. I live on my own. I was in LA for 2 years. I didn't leave. I didn't go back to the UK. I didn't see my mum, dad, no one for 2 years. The only person I literally saw was this dog. And I think that pets offer something that humans don't. They offer the comfort and the love without the ego. And, like Samir was saying, a lot of the time you want to talk to someone about what you're going through or whatever. And they're just not equipped to deal with it. So they'll be like, oh, snap out of it, or it'll be fine, or stay positive. Stay positive is another one, which I cannot stand, which is like, I was like, thanks for that. Like, as if I'm not trying that already.
I think nobody's saying that nowadays because of COVID. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, because of COVID. Right? This is the only time where you actually want to be negative. But it's, and again, most of the people aren't doing it because they're trying to be mean or anything. It's literally because they don't know what else to say. And I always say in the book, I'm a big believer. If you don't have anything, most of the time people don't want you to say something. They just want someone to listen, right? They don't want you to fix them. That was entirely my thing with the book, is people aren't looking to be fixed. They're just looking to be heard. And funnily enough, a pet gives you that. A pet actually, not from the fact that it doesn't speak, but it literally will listen to you and it'll be there for you. And most of the time, that's all people want, is that comfort without trying to be fixed or anything like that. So I'd say this, I would say, and if you have a pet or if you have access to animals or anything like that, and you are going through something, don't underestimate the power in what they can provide.
Yeah, I think it's just that it's unconditional love. I mean, really.
Yeah.
I mean, they say that if you want to know how much a person loves you, your spouse, lock your spouse and your pet in that room for 4 hours and then let them out and just see the difference. Your pet will be just happy to see you, and your spouse just might kick you out. So.
Yeah.
True, absolutely. I can see Professor Vijay is back, and even though I have about 20 more questions, I'm sure that there are questions that the audience is asking.
I wish we had at least 20 minutes more, but unfortunately we don't. And there are lots and lots of comments and questions in the chat box, and I thought it would be unfair if we don't take at least a few of them. There are many observations, but one thing that is running through most of the comments is that how is it that when we talk about mental health, I mean, why are we looking at, let's say, these two privileged people talking about their mental health? And in the sense that they have the opportunity to try what they want in life and then realize that they are not, but most of the time, people don't have that luxury of trying it out. So that's one general comment that has come. But the more pointed questions, one for Sidhartha and one for Samir, is that from my colleague, HLF colleague Amita Desai, who is asking, Sidhartha, do you think one gets lost between identities because one has not had the time and the space to find ourselves before some of these identities are already imposed upon us?
Yes, just before I answer that, just to the comment that, both Samir and myself both said this actually at the beginning as well. And we both do appreciate that we were in positions that we could make changes. And I don't think anyone's trying to shy away from that fact at all. We were fortunate to be able to do it in a way, and we did. And I think that what we're doing now is just using the platforms that we have and the opportunities that we have to share our experiences, to potentially help others in whatever way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to look the same, and but there's usually help in some way, shape, or form for everyone out there. Coming to the identity thing, I think that a lot of the time people don't know themselves, and they never know themselves. And that's because they don't really want to know themselves. It's called self-work for a reason, right? It requires work. It requires looking in the mirror and being vulnerable. It involves putting your hands up in surrender and being like, you know what? There are some really dark, bad sides to me, which I don't like. And I want to change them, and I want to make that change. But I think a lot of the time, people don't want to look in the mirror, and they don't want to admit these flaws that they have. And it's easier to just to stay with the identity that they think they have to be than actually front up and face and make the change. That was something I did when I was in my early 20s, for sure. I mean, I didn't have the self-awareness when I was in my early 20s to look into the front in the mirror and be like, oh my God, I'm being run by the ego, but not many 20-year-olds do. But yeah, I'd say that if you're willing to look at yourself, there's definitely ways to go.
Samir, this is a question for you. Samir, do you feel that now you are comfortable where you are? And do you find yourself in silence, or does this take you deeper into the maze?
I think it's a constant battle. You can never say that, okay, now I'm in comfortable in one's skin. It's like saying, oh, now my body is built, or now my brain is fine. It's a daily thing, because you have old habits, whether they're thought patterns, whether they're circumstances. But it's never like that. I mean, you do have to, but you're far more aware and probably more well equipped to deal with the situations. One cannot say that, oh, you've had that magic blue pill or red pill, whatever that was, and suddenly everything is very clear. It's not. But you're aware of what is not right, or at least you're aware of this is who I am. But you still have to protect it. because you still will be put in situations in which that will be challenged. Or the habits that you've formed that you still are seeking, a part of you still is seeking for validation, and will say, hey man, that'd be pretty cool if people like me and I, become, this book sells or my movie does well. So that there are those intrinsic things, and you have to say, hey, watch it. Now you're getting carried away. Now this is your ego talking now. We can back up here. You can't judge yourself through the eyes of how people perceive you. So I mean, I'm in a better off place earlier, because earlier I did not know what I was dealing with. Now I'm pretty aware, and to me, like, it's sort of kind of becoming like a crusade, because I'm sick and tired of the social media, of the projections they do, that what is success, what is happiness, and they're showing these things to people, and people who are probably be perfectly happy think there's something wrong with them, because they feel that if I get that, then it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So that to me is a crusade. That was my daughter. So yeah, give me 5 minutes.
I think she's the better alarm than we are.
Yeah, she's my life. She's my life. So yeah, and I think also this whole thing about privileged and not privileged. I mean, Jim Carrey once said that those people, I wish everyone in this world for one day would be rich and famous to know what it means, because that is no answer. That is no answer. Your issues are your issues. When you sleep alone, in that sense, with your own issues. Whether you're a rich man, a poor man, a famous man, if you're unhappy, even 1 billion people know you, doesn't matter. If you're happy and no one knows who you are, then again doesn't matter. So this whole cliche thing, oh, you got a privilege and because of that. No. There's I'll ask you a simple question, which I ask a lot of people. Is a poor man happier, or is a poor unhappy man better off, or is a rich unhappy man better off? That's a classic question. More often than not, people will say the rich unhappy man is better off because he has, resources. And I say no. The poor unhappy man is better off because he still thinks that one day when he will be rich, the questions will be answered. He will be eventually happy. For the rich man already knows, man, I got the helicopters and everything. That's not getting me very far. But for a poor man, there's still some hope there. There's something to aspire for, thinking eventually if I do get there, I would be happy. And the way the society tells us the way to go forward, I question it completely.
Yeah, can I say something on that as well? Because I think it's interesting is that, you see, I'm here in Los Angeles, and I can go down the street and see some homeless people who are the happiest, brightest, most caring, loving people you will ever meet. And I will have conversations with them, right? Take then the actor Robin Williams. Global star, worth millions of dollars, Oscar winner, and a comedian, right? Comedy. So everything on the outside, you would assume this guy has the perfect life. And what does he do? He commits suicide. So with that, surely that shatters any preconceived notion of what happiness should look like or what should make you happy.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but there are so many questions. There are at least 100 questions more in the chat box, but unfortunately, what you said about the poor man is still better off because he has a future, right? Reminds me of one of my favorite cartoon strips long ago. It's called Inside Woody Allen, and there is one particular cartoon which shows that Woody Allen climbing the mountain, and at the top there is a sage, and Woody Allen asks him, "Where is happiness?" And the sage at the top shows him the downward slope. So so I think it's very important, and many comments in the chat box say how important it is for us to recognize mental health as an issue. And people like you who are in public life with a public profile, speaking about it really makes people, not only perhaps gives them that, if not courage, but at least the honesty to raise these questions in the public domain. Thank you very much, Sidhartha and Samir. And Anu, thank you very much for moderating this session. wonderful to have all of you with us at HLF. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, we close the first session of the second day of the 3-day festival. And we will see you in another 6 minutes' time. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
పున్నాము వెన్నాల కోలు పూసి కాసిందే కోలు పున్నాము వెన్నాల కోలు పూసి కాసిందే కోలు నీరు నిమ్మల కింద గన్నెర్ల కింద వంగి పూలే రంగ కొంగందుకునే వంగి పూలే రంగ
but वो काफी लंबा है.
We are ready to.
Okay.
Give me cue. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second session of day 2 of HLF 2022. That's too many twos for you. So this session, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Rajkumar Hans, who will be in conversation with Raj Kali. And I'll take a minute to introduce the moderator first, which is Dr. Rajkumar Hans, who retired as a professor of history from MS University, Baroda. He now lives in Amritsar and continues actively pursue his research on the history of the Dalits in Punjab and their marginalization in the Sikh tradition. Rajkumar ji is currently working on 2 monographs. One is on the history of Punjabi Dalit literature, and second, the history of Dalits in Sikh religion. Dr. Rajkumar Hans will be in conversation with Raj Kali, and Raj ji is a leading Punjabi Dalit writer, historian, columnist, and currently he's also the vice president of the Punjab Sahitya Academy. And I know what a busy time he has right now, because I remember when I spoke to him last time, he launched 70 programs in 7 days. And remember, this is the election time in Punjab. So Raj Kali, his primary areas of research of interest are the Gadar movement, the Dalit issues, Punjabi literature, and very interestingly, he engages very actively with myth and culture. And he has published 14 books, including 6 novels and 3 short story anthologies. In discussion today is his 2009 novel Shanti Parav, which has been recently translated into English by Neeti Singh. And Raj ji also edits and runs a literary quarterly called Lakir. And ladies and gentlemen, the book that will be in discussion this morning is titled Shanti Parav, Treatise on Peace. And this was, as I said, originally written in Punjabi, and it's a post-independence novel set in the heartland of Punjab. And it brilliantly parodies the peace claims of its source text. As you know, Shanti Parav is the 12th book of the Mahabharata. And Raj ji's novel provides a radical Dalit response from the margins of history to its justifications of the ruling elite through gentle interrogation, subversive literary technique, and fragments of alternative history. Raj ji and Rajkumar ji, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And I leave the platform for you. And apart from many other things, ladies and gentlemen, Rajkumar ji will also try to contextualize Raj Kali's writing. Apart from the one book that I mentioned, Shanti Parav, he tries to, or he will attempt to contextualize Raj Kali's writings. Thank you, Dr. Rajkumar, and thank you, Raj ji, for joining us this morning. And we are looking forward to this session. And Rajkumar ji, just one quick announcement. I'll be back on screen in about 35 minutes. And that means that is a signal that we should be winding down the session. I'll come back with audience questions. So over to you, Dr. Rajkumar Hans.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vijay Kumar ji, for introducing us. Such a lovely shining day here after almost a month of foggy days and so on. It was almost like a British weather where sun could not be seen for long times. So thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be with Raj Kali ji, who is an eminent writer, thinker, He is a painter as well. He is a journalist. He has started recently on YouTube serial called Barkata, where he discusses siyasat and that is politics. And one on Sundays, he also discusses the literature. So he's a literary man we have. As Vijayji said, I would contextualize Kali and myself in that sense because thanks to the Hyderabad Literary Festival that they have focused this time on Punjabi language and literature. So it's very interesting. I am a historian. We have a creative writer with us, and we must make sense of Punjab. And I would quickly highlight some of the salient features of Punjab and Punjabis. Punjab, as you know, it is northwest frontier of the undivided India, the subcontinent. It was also a gateway to India from the massive high mountains of Himalayas and Hindu Kush, and only few passes, they were called darras, from Afghanistan. People from north and northwest entered into the subcontinent, but their first stop, first encounter was always Punjab. So geography defined the history of Punjab. And as you are mostly aware that one of the three earliest civilizations of the world, they thrived in Punjab because it's also called Harappan civilization. Harappa is a city now in the western Punjab in Pakistan. That is a wonderful beginning of, say, history of Punjab, history of India in general. And thereafter, we have those gates, passes used to enter into the subcontinent. And the first ones to come from the other side of the mountains were the Aryans, and they wrote, they composed their Vedas, especially the Rig Veda, on the land of Punjab. That is a kind of history that we have. And as we are all aware that how well developed this civilization was of Harappan civilization. Harappan civilization was also earlier called Indus Valley civilization because it was thronged, you see, along the rivers or both sides of the rivers of Sindh, which is also called Hind by the Persians and Arabs. Quickly moving through from such kind of trajectories, it also became the land of the Buddhist thinking, Buddhist way of life, as one of the two earliest universities of the world. One of Takshashila was located in Punjab. It is now in the Western Punjab in the Pakistan right now. So that has been the trajectory of the movements of thoughts, of makings, and various other things. And obviously, of the subcontinent, Punjabi formed a frontier society. And frontier society, as it is, it had to resist all kinds of comers, whether they were warriors or they were religious leaders or they were thinkers or they were traders and so on. People were hardworking. The plains of Punjab were very fertile. They were warriors. They had to encounter the people. They were romantic society. They were known for their hospitality and so on. Yesterday, the session began with the book Amritsar by the Rais, husband and wife, and they were talking about it, how the you see, Sikh religion came into being and so on. So I would not take much time, but I would say after, say, the slow decline of Buddhist way of life, even from India, from Punjab, along with from the entire subcontinent, those thoughts were survived and they were preserved by the yogis, Siddhas and yogis, and they were both, they inhabited the lands of Punjab. So immediately, if I will not talk about the kind of, you see, the long tradition of literary creativity of in Punjab, but I would just mention that the Adi Kavi, Valmiki wrote his Ramayana in the land of Punjab. She was a kind of native person, but who wrote his text Ramayana in Sanskrit. Sanskrit was not, it did not have its own kind of script. So that is not the best kind of compositions which you find through in the medieval times is composed, you find in Shri Guru Granth Sahib, which was actually composed by the fifth Guru, Guru Arjan Dev, in 1604, and it is the unique spiritual religious text where people or the thinkers from all communities, from Muslims or the artisan communities, you have Kabir, you have Guru Ravidas, and you have Namdev from, you have Jayadev from Bengal. So it's such a composite kind of culture that Punjab had known. And interestingly, not going in the details, that Punjabis also learned how to sacrifice their lives. शहादत देने की एक आदत है, क्योंकि इस्लाम का यहाँ पर आगमन हुआ। और मैं क्यों हिंदी में बोल रहा हूँ, मैं ये भी बात कर दूं कि देसराज काली जी के साथ जब बातचीत होगी तो वो हिंदी में ही करेंगे, बट as I began talking in generally for the general public in English, I will just continue with that for a brief moment. I will say that
Rajkumar ji, sorry for butting in.
Yeah.
You know, we are already 15 minutes into the session. So
okay.
Could
Sorry.
we start the conversation, please?
Fine, sir. Sorry, I took longer.
I know you are a historian and you are an academic, and and academics have the habit of giving lecture in the classroom. I'm also one of them, so I can understand that. But
okay. Sorry, I think I quickly come to the Raj Kali's times. It is a post-independence kind of text, as you have already been informed by or given a brief introduction by Vijay Kumarji, but I would focus right now on this unique text called Shanti Parav. Shanti Parav is a unique in its style. I was struck by its depth, its width, its fragmentation, and so on and so on forth. But I think it's better to ask देसराज काली जी कि आपके मन में ये आइडिया कैसे आया कि पेज को 2 हिस्सों में बांटा जाए और ऊपर जो है एक स्टोरीज चल रही हैं, वो 16 एपिसोड से इंडिपेंडेंट भी हैं एक दूसरे से, उनका मिलाप भी है, और नीचे जो है एक इंटेलेक्चुअल डिस्कोर्सेस चल रहे हैं। तो काली जी आप बताएं।
थैंक यू भाई साहब, और हैदराबाद लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल की सारी टीम, डॉक्टर विजय कुमार जी आदरणीय, जितने भी लोग हम सभी जुड़े हुए हैं, पहले तो आदाब। शांति पर्व मेरे लिए कुछ कैरेक्टर्स को देखना, समझना, पढ़ना, सुनना, उनके अनकहे को सुनना, जो वो नहीं बोलते उनको सुनना, मैं उनके भीतर जाना चाहता था, बहुत भीतर, बहुत ज्यादा भीतर जाना चाहता था उनके। जब भीतर जाते हैं तो जेनेटिक स्टडीज में चला जाता हूं मैं, उनकी पीढ़ियों पीछे, सदियों पीछे चला जाता हूं। क्यों मैंने इसका नाम शांति पर्व इसलिए रखा कि सदियों पीछे जो काम कर रहा है हमारी सोशल साइकोलॉजी में, वो पौराण कर रहे हैं। बुद्धिज्म को अगर गिराना है, अगर मारना है उस थॉट को, तो पौराण कथाएं लेकर आओ, लोगों में गाओ, लोगों के घरों तक ले जाओ लोगों को। मैं साउथ का लिटरेचर पढ़ रहा हूँ, वो भक्ति काव्य को, जो चक्की पीसती हैं महिलाएं, उनके गीतों तक ले गए वो भक्ति काव्य को। तो भक्ति से अगर आपको आत्मसात करना है, अगर आपको थिंकर्स को खा लेना है, अगर चार तत्वों में, 4 एलिमेंट्स में चारवाक जो हैं, जो बुद्धिस्ट हैं, अगर उनको खत्म करना है आइडियोलॉजिकली, तो उनको खा जाओ पौराण कथाओं में। तो मैं देख रहा हूं जो पौराण कथाएं मेरे पीछे, इन सभी पौराणों में लगभग 100% पौराण जो हैं वो औरत और शूद्र को पाप जोनी कहते हैं। तो उनके भीतर ये उतार दो कि तुम अगर अपने पति की सेवा करोगी और ये अगर अपने मास्टर की सेवा करेगा, अपर कास्ट की सेवा करेगा, ब्राह्मण की सेवा करेगा, तो उद्धार होगा इसका। बहुत सारी कथाएं आपको मिल जाएंगी। तो मैं देख रहा हूं कि अगर मैं एक दलित कैरेक्टर देख रहा हूं तो उसके पीछे क्या है यार। तो फिर मैंने क्या कहा कि ऊपर जो टेक्स्ट चल रहा है, जो जीवन चल रहा है, वो चल रहा है ऐसी तरह से, मगर वहां एक कैरेक्टर आ गया, एक दलित कैरेक्टर आ गया, उसकी दुर्दशा आ गई, उसके हालात आ गए, उसकी सोशल जो जो स्टेटस है वो आ गया, उसकी कास्ट आ गई, उसकी कुंठाएं आ गई, उसकी फ्रस्ट्रेशंस आ गई, उसकी इकोनॉमिक कंडीशन आ गई। तो मैंने कहा इसका कारण जो है वो यहाँ पड़ा है, आप वहां जाइए, नीचे पागमल पागल हैं। पागमल पागल was a poet, he was a general secretary of scheduled caste फेडरेशन, डॉक्टर बाबा साहब भीमराव अम्बेडकर जी ने बनाई थी, बाद में जिसे तोड़कर उन्होंने लेबर पार्टी बनाई। तो मैंने कहा पागमल पागल के पास जाओ। तो पागमल पागल क्या कर रहा है कि वो पौराण भी बता रहा है, वो महाराजा, वो अंग्रेज की हिस्ट्री भी बता रहा है, दलितों के साथ क्या हो रहा है, वो महाराजा रंजीत सिंह की हिस्ट्री भी बता रहा है, किस तरह से बगार ली जाती है, वो चक्कियां पीसती हैं, उनको एक वक्त का खाना मिलता है, तो वो ईंटें वो बनाते हैं, किले वो बनाते हैं, मगर उनको रहने के लिए झोपड़ी भी नसीब नहीं होती। फिर इंतकाल अराजी एक्ट आ जाता है, जो ये शेड्यूल्ड कास्ट बना दी जाती हैं। तो वो फिर उनकी एक एक बारीक, जितनी भी बारीकियां हैं वो सभी गिनाता चला जाता है। वो मोनोलॉग के अपने आप से बातें कर रहा है। तो ये जो आपने उसके फॉर्म की बात की सर, आपने, हाँ सर, तो फॉर्म में मुझे लगा कि ये जो इतनी बातें जानते हैं, ये जो इंटेलेक्चुअल्स हैं, ये जो प्रोफेसर जॉर्ज हैं, ये जो पागमल पागल हैं, ये जो कॉमरेड हैं, जो मार्क्सिस्ट व्यू से देखना चाहते हैं सोसाइटी को, देख रहे हैं, ये सोसाइटी में मार्जिनलाइज्ड कर दिए गए हैं, हाशिए पे ले जाया गया। सो दैट्स व्हाई कि वो इतना इंपॉर्टेंट होते हुए भी उसका निचले भाग में है, यानी उनको कोई सुन नहीं रहा। देखिए ये फॉर्म भी एक बड़ी खतरनाक है, इसे उन्हें कोई सुन नहीं रहा, वो खुद से बातें कर रहे हैं। आप सोसाइटी में देखिए, आज देखिए, 10 साल पहले, 20 साल पहले देखिए, इनको कोई नहीं सुनता, ना प्रोफेसर को कोई सुनता है, ना पागमल पागल को, कुछ दलित इंटेलेक्चुअल को, ना कॉमरेड को कुछ सुनता है। ये हाशिए पर चले गए। वो कब, कैसे, कहां गए, मैं ये दिखाना चाहता
था। इसको पूरा करने में कितना टाइम लगा? ये आइडिया आपके मन में कब आया था? ये 2009 में पब्लिश हुआ, तो आइडिया कब से शुरुआत कब?
ये 5 साल लग गए, लगभग 5 साल लग गए। एक इंटरेस्टिंग बात आपको बताता हूँ। पागमल पागल जो थे वो नीला महल में रहते, मल्ला करार खां में रहते थे, जलंधर का वाल्मीकि भाईचारा वहां रहता है वो। तो मैं उनके पास जाया करता था, तो वो मुझे जानते थे, ऐसी बात नहीं। हम कई बार, वो बुजुर्ग हो गए थे, सेहत खराब थी उनकी, तो उन्हें पता चल गया कि इसे मुझसे कुछ चाहिए, तो वो बीमार हो जाया करते थे। वो कहते यार मैं तो आज बीमार हूँ बहुत ज्यादा, दवाई के लिए पैसे नहीं है, मेरे पास भी नहीं होते थे पैसे। तो वो पैसे फिर उन्होंने कहना कि अब तुम दवाई के लिए पैसे दे दो, 2 दिन के बाद तुम आ जाना। जब मैं, चलो जितने भी होते थे, मैं दवाई के लिए पैसे दे देता था। तब वो फिर एक बार मुझसे बातें करते थे कुछ, दूसरे दिन फिर बीमार हो जाते थे। तो मुझे 6 महीने तो भगवान पागल के पास जाते जाते लग गए। इसी तरह 6 महीने में मैं अंडरस्टैंड कर पाया कि 3 लोग हैं तो तीनों की स्ट्रीम ऑफ कॉन्शियसनेस अलग है, तीनों की जुबान अलग है। आप देख, बीच में कुछ कामरेड आ गए हैं तो उनका मैं उनको बहुत स्टडी की, मैंने उनकी लैंग्वेज स्टडी करता था, उनके बैठने उठने का अंदाज, उनकी साइकोलॉजी देखता। जैसे प्रोफेसर जॉल है, तो उनके वो अपनी माँ, वृद्ध माँ है उनकी, तो वो माँ की बहुत चिंता करते थे। तो फिर मैंने वो फिक्शनलाइज्ड करके, नॉवल नहीं है ऐसा ना लगे, तो मैंने वो फिक्शनलाइज्ड किए। जैसे भगवान पागल की वाइफ को मैंने फिक्शनलाइज कर दिया, इसी तरह जॉल की वाइफ माँ को फिक्शनलाइज कर दिया। वो उनके मन में वो ही बैठी रहती है कि उसकी साफ सफाई मैंने करनी है, मेरी पत्नी से उनकी बनती नहीं है, वो उसको हाथ नहीं लगाने देते हैं, वो जो जो जॉल के। इसी तरह कॉमरेड के पास एक इनविजिबल, जैसे विजय कह रहे थे कि हमें दिखाई नहीं देगा, हो गए हम इनविजिबल, चलेगा। तो वो इनविजिबल कैरेक्टर है जो गालियां निकालता है, गालियां निकालता है। तो वो मैंने फिक्शनलाइज कर दिया। कॉमरेड के पास जाता था, मैं समझना चाहता था, वो ब्राह्मण था, तो उसके भीतर कहीं कास्ट बैठी हुई है। स्टडी 2-3 साल तो इन तीनों कैरेक्टरों को मुझे स्टडी करते, उनकी लैंग्वेज को स्टडी, आकर डायरी लिखता था। तो वो सेंटेंस मेकिंग कैसी है, वो जब बोलते हैं तो उनका एक्सप्रेशन क्या है और वो कितना लंबा सेंटेंस बोलते हैं। आप देखें कि तीनों यूनिक कैरेक्टर्स हैं। बाकी तो मेरे आसपास ही चले, वो महिलाएं, वो बीमार महिलाएं, वो सफाई कर्मचारी, वो पत्रकार, वो रेडी वाले, वो सारे वो तो मेरे जीवन का हिस्सा थे, वो तो थे ही, पर इन पर मुझे स्टडी करनी पड़ी। तो 5 साल के करीब मुझे लग गया। एक और इंटरेस्टिंग बात होता था, नावल छप गया। नावल छपने के बाद चला गया लोगों के पास। तो क्या हुआ कि पागमल जी की डेथ हो गई। तो हमारे यहाँ एक वीकली अखबार निकलती है, अपनी मिट्टी, मेरे दोस्त निकालते हैं, प्रोफेसर साहब जानते हैं, अजय कुमार जी। तो उन्होंने कहा कि यार पागमल जी की डेथ हो गई है, तुमने जो पोर्शन लिखा है नॉवल का, क्या मैं उसे रिप्रोड्यूस कर दूं अपनी अखबार में? तो वो अखबार दलितों में बहुत जाती है। तो मैंने कहा कर दो यार, वो तो हमारे बुजुर्ग थे, है ना, इतनी लड़ाई लड़ी। डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर के 26 अलीपुर रोड की कोठी में बिना दस्तक दिए अगर कोई जा सकता था तो वो पागमल पागल थे, ये इतनी उनका नेड़ता थी डॉक्टर बी.आर. अम्बेडकर जी के साथ। तो मैंने कहा छाप दो, उन्होंने छाप दिया। अब उसमें शब्द जो है वो चूड़ा लिखा हुआ है। माय गॉड, वो उन घरों में चलेगी, वहां तो आफत आ गई, ये शब्द कैसे आ गया। और तैयारी हो गई कि काली के घर को जला दिया जाए, मिट्टी का तेल भी आ गया, 100-200 लोग भी इकट्ठे हो गए, मगर फिर बच गए, वो नहीं मैं बताऊंगा। जिंदगी है ऐसी चलती है। तो इस नावल के साथ जुड़ी हुई थी, मैंने आपको बताया।
नहीं, बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है, क्योंकि ये किसी भी रचना को किसी सांचे में ढाल देना या किसी क्या कहते हैं पिजन होलिंग में कर देना, वो आसान बात हो जाती है। वो डिवाइसेस भी होंगी, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि आपका जो खास करके ये नावल है, ये बड़ा इंक्लूसिव है। ऐसा नहीं है कि इसमें सिर्फ दलितों की बात हुई है, इसमें हर कौम के, हर कम्युनिटी के लोग शामिल हैं और बड़ी आपने उसको सहानुभूति के साथ देखा है या दर्द के साथ देखा है। जैसे औरतों की बात की है तो मेरा ख्याल उनकी जो पीड़ा है, उनकी जो खास करके कठिनाइयां हैं जिससे जूझ रही हैं, उसको बड़ी बाखूबी लिखा है। चाहे वो, क्योंकि ये फर्स्ट पर्सन में बात की गई है, आप प्रोटैगनिस्ट हैं, आप कहते हैं कि भाई मेरा बाप ऐसा है, मेरे बहन का बहनोई को ऐसा हो गया। ये सारी चीजें एक तरीके का ऑटोबायोग्राफिकल भी हैं, क्योंकि हर जो लेखक है वो बहुत कुछ ऑब्जर्व करता है। जैसे कहते हैं कि साइंस की जो पहली कड़ी होती है वो ऑब्जर्वेशन ही होती है, वैसे मैं भी समझता हूँ कि लेखक की भी या पोएट की भी पहली कड़ी तो ऑब्जर्वेशन ही होता है। और ऑब्जर्वेशन भी डीप साइकोलॉजी तक पहुंचना बड़ी बात होती है। अगर ये इंक्लूसिव है तो आप इसको, ठीक है कि दलित पर्सपेक्टिव से जरूर देखा गया है, जैसे अभी भागमल की बात कर रहे थे अभी आप, तो ये पर्सपेक्टिव बहुत जरूरी है। अभी अभी मुझे पर्सपेक्टिव की बात याद आ गई, तो पंजाब में एक काफी दहाकों के बाद जो पहला मुख्यमंत्री चरणजीत सिंह चन्नी बना, कांग्रेस की जो भी सर्कमस्टांसेस से, तो उसको प्रचार जो है अखबारों में या मीडिया पर ऐसा हुआ कि दलित चीफ मिनिस्टर बन गया, दलित चीफ मिनिस्टर बन गया। ये बात सही है कि भाई सबसे, अगर सभी प्रदेशों से जनसंख्या दलितों की देखी जाए, सब जितने भी स्टेट्स हैं पूरे भारत के, तो 35% जो है पंजाब के लोग दलित हैं, लेकिन दलितों की कभी बात ही नहीं हुई। अब दलितों की बहुत सारी कलाएं हैं, जैसे लेखनी की बात है, आप उसी ट्रेडिशन से आते हैं। मैंने कुछ काम किया था कि दलित, प्री दलित कॉन्शियसनेस का जो पीरियड है गुरुओं के टाइम से डाउन द लाइन, वहां बहुत हमारे बड़े इंटेलेक्चुअल पोएट्स हुए हैं, और उस कड़ी का आगे हिस्सा बनता है जो आदि धर्म मूवमेंट जो 1925-26 में शुरू होती है, और बड़ी मूवमेंट, ऑटोनोमस दलित मूवमेंट है, और अपने आप को वो मूल निवासी कहते हैं कि हड़प्पन सिविलाइजेशन, हमारा तो धर्म ही आदि धर्म है, जैसे आदि कवि था, हमारा धर्म भी आदि है। तो ये जो चिंता का विषय है हमारे और आपके चिंतन का विषय रहा है, ये आपकी दूसरी लेखनियों में, दूसरी जो रचनाएं हैं उसमें भी ऐसे ही आता है, क्योंकि मिथ्या की आपको बहुत पकड़ है, गुरुबाणी की बहुत पकड़ है, साधुओं संतों फकीरों और सूफियों पर आपका काफी, यू आर ए वोरेशियस रीडर। आप सारे इस चीज को कैसे कर पाते हैं, बिकॉज इट्स सच ए स्मॉल बट येट ए बिजी लाइफ। आप बताएं जरा।
मैं पहले एक बात जो आप करेक्टर्स की करते थे कि वो सारे ऑब्जर्वेशन की बात आप कर रहे थे, मैं एक आपको बात बताता हूँ। मेरे सिस्टर हैं मुझसे बड़े, 2 सिस्टर हैं, एक सबसे बड़े एक मुझसे बड़े, तो बहुत ज्यादा गरीबी, अति दर्जे की। तो वो मेरे जीजा जी पता नहीं क्या मन में आया, वो बीमार हो गए, मेंटल सिक हो गए, पागल हो गए पंजाबी में जिसे कहते हैं, वो बहुत ज्यादा बीमार। तो उनकी अवस्था मुझसे देखी नहीं गई, तो मैं उनको ना हॉस्पिटल लेकर गया, सिविल हॉस्पिटल में। मेरी वाइफ साथ थी। मैं कैसे कैसे आपके जीवन में कई बार ऐसी घटनाएं हो जाती हैं। वो डॉक्टर मेरे दोस्त थे, तो मैंने कहा यार इस तरह से इनका, वो उनसे बात कर रहे थे, मेरे जीजा जी से, मेरे बहनोई से। तो वो पूछते हैं क्या क्या होता है आपको। वो पंजाबी में बोल रहे हैं, कहते कां करलौंदे ने, कौए जो हैं, क्रोज जो हैं, वो रोते हैं मेरे दिमाग में, बहुत सारे कौए रो रहे हैं मेरे दिमाग में। और साथ में वो कहते हैं कि हमें ये पता है किसी को इट पत्थर नहीं मारना, यानी किसी व्यक्ति को, मुझे ये पता है, मुझे ये मालूम है कि किसी को मारना नहीं है। किसी जो हिंसक, वो हिंसक हो जाते थे, मगर वो किसी को मारते नहीं थे, गालियां बकते थे, जो जो से चिल्लाते थे, अपने आप को पीटते थे, मगर वो कहते मुझे पता है किसी को नहीं मारना, ईंट पत्थर नहीं मारना। मेरा मैं होने लगा, हाँ यार, एक गरीब आदमी, एक दलित व्यक्ति जो गरीबी के कारण पागल हो गया, उसे ये पता है किसी को मारना नहीं है। यानी you can't imagine, ये इतने सेंसिटिव लोग पागल होकर भी इतने सॉरी इतने सेंसिटिव। अच्छा, वो मेरे दीदी जो है वो इतनी वो दुख में कहती, वो बीमार है, हॉस्पिटलाइज्ड है, 2 महीने हॉस्पिटल रहे, हम उनकी सेवा करते रहे। वो मुझे चुटकुला सुना रही है, मुझे लतीफा सुना रही है। कहती एक आदमी गया मछली वाले के पास, कहता है मछली देना, इसमें कांटे तो नहीं है? कहता कोई बात नहीं, तुम चप्पल पहन कर खा लेना। वो ये लोग बीमार हिंसक होते हुए भी किसी पर हिंसा नहीं कर रहे, और दुख में हंसना कैसे है? मैं नहीं हंस सकता दुख में, मगर वो मेरी सिस्टर हंस लेती है, बहुत हंसती है, बहुत हंसती है, वो लतीफे सुनाती है। तो ये लोग मेरे अपने, कौन किसी को, सबको अपनी ही किसी बात पे रोना है, कौन काहे की ऑब्जर्वेशन। अपने भीतर ही दुख पैदा कर लेता हूं मैं, अपने भीतर दुख कर लेता हूं, दुख पैदा हो जाता है। मेरे ये ऑफिस है, मेरे सामने से 2 गुजरती हैं, एक माँ है, एक बेटी है, सफाई करती हैं घरों में जाकर, तो वो गुजरती हैं, मैं देख लेता हूँ, कोई बात नहीं, बोला। साल गुजर गए, एक दिन बेटी अकेली जा रही है, माँ नहीं है। पहले कभी उनके बारे में चिंता नहीं चला, उसी वक्त चिंतन चलने लग गया, इसकी माँ बीमार हो गई होगी, वो मर गई होगी, अब ये अकेली घरों में जाएगी, घरों में इसके साथ बदसलूकी हो सकती है, माँ साथ होगी तो इसके साथ कोई बदसलूकी नहीं करेगा। तो वो सारे पंजाब की, यूपी की, बिहार की महिलाएं जिनके बारे में आपने कहा, तो वो उनका दुख पैदा हो गया, उस लड़की का दुख पैदा हो गया। मेरी माँ बन गई, मेरी बहन बन गई, वो मेरी बेटी बन गई। वो दुख फिर सारा मेरे नॉवल में आ गया। वो महिलाएं जो हैं वो मेरी हैं, मेरे भीतर कहीं बैठी हुई हैं, मैं अकेला ऑब्जर्व नहीं करता सर, मैं उनमें जीता हूं। मुझे कई बार उनकी बीमारियां मुझे लग जाती हैं। मैं एक महिला शुगर से मर गई, मुझे शुगर हो गई, मुझे लग गई उसकी सारी बीमारियां। ये जो लिखना है ना, ये जो अपना पोष उतार कर चमड़ी उधेड़ दी जाए और आपको कहा जाए कि नमक की खान में से गुजरो। नमक की खान है, बहुत लंबी टनल है, नमक की है, वो सारी सॉल्ट की टनल है, उसमें से पोष शम्स तबरेज की तरह उतरी हुई है, और आपको कहते हैं नमक की खान से गुजरो। आपका दरिया है और डूब जाना है। और जो मिथ्स की, जो हिस्ट्री की, जो हाथों की, जो सिद्धों की है, वो मेरी परवरिश है। हमारे वहां, हमारे मोहल्ले में गुग्गा की टोली खिलाते थे, तो गुग्गा की टोली खिला रहे हैं तो वो गुग्गा गा रहे हैं, तो मैं बचपन में ही समझ लीजिए कि गोरखनाथ से इंट्रोडक्शन मेरी हो गई। बचपन से ही गोरखनाथ मैंने वो सीख लिया कि बोलना नहीं है, सुनना है। गोरखनाथ कह रहे हैं, मुझे पता चल गया गोरखनाथ क्या कह रहे हैं। मुझे गोरखनाथ पढ़ना नहीं पड़ा, मेरे आले दुआले ने, मेरे इर्द गिर्द ने, मेरे आसपास से मैं गोरखनाथ से खेलने लगा। मैं गोरखनाथ की गोदी में पैदा हुआ हूं, मैं ये कहता हूँ। मैं कबीर की गोदी में खेला हूं, मैं ये कहता हूँ। मैं फोक, इतना रिच ट्रेडिशन है फोक पंजाबी का, मेरी माँ गाती थी, इतना रिच ट्रेडिशन है। तो कृष्ण के मुरारी रूप को सेलिब्रेट कर रहे हैं। नीमे नीमे आजा बालमा में मैं कन्या कुआरी है, जेतु कन्या कुआरी गोरिये मैं कृष्ण मुरारी है। कृष्ण का मुरारी रूप जो अचूते है, जो डिस्चार्ज नहीं होता, वो मुरारी रूप मेरे फोक में पड़ा हुआ, इतना गहन, फिलोसफिकल, पौराणिक, इतना गहन। और मेरे पिताजी अनपढ़, पढ़े नहीं, मगर उन्होंने गुरमुखी सीखी। हट कर लिया कि मैंने गुरमुखी सीखनी है, जब तक नहीं सीखूंगा रोटी नहीं खाऊंगा। खेख डाल ली, स्वाह जिसे कहते हैं, मिट्टी डाल ली, उसमें कूड़ा मुक्ता ऐड़ा करना, आम ईश्यारी बिहारी बिहारी, 3 दिन में गुरमुखी सी, फिर रोटी खाई, पानी भी तब पिया। तो फिर वो किस्से पढ़ते थे। पंजाबी में सबसे रिच लिटरेचर जो आज तक का है वो किस्सा काव्य है। तो जिंदगी बला साधु दया सिंह आरिफ का, वो मुछ फुटी शरीर ने दम कुमारी ते दुधा काशनी रंग रंगाउण लगा, यानी वो जवान हो गया, मुछे आ गई, शरीर में चमक पैदा हो गई, तो उसकी कलर सेंस चेंज हुई, दुधा काशनी रंग रंगाउण लगा। वो कलर जो पाता है वो दुध काशनी रंग हो गया उसका, है ना, दुधा काशनी रंग। यानी उसकी कलर की बॉडी में जो बदलाव आ रहे हैं उम्र के लिहाज से, तो बीज के गिरने से मरने के बाद की मुक्ति का एक एक हाल हवाल जिंदगी बलास। जानी चोर पढ़ते थे हम 12 हिस्सों में, पंडित किशोर चंद बद्दोवाली का, मुझे अब भी याद है जानी चोर। वो एक किले में, मान सिंह के किले में, तो वो माता को याद करता है, महीनों के साथ नाम जोड़कर, चेत चैत पौर्णी विसाख वस वैष्णो तू जेठ ते ज्वाला में छाई हो आन के, आड़ हिंग लाल सौण शीतला तू सुखदाता, भाद्रो भद्र काली बौड़ छेती आए के, असुआसा देवी ते कतक काली चंड का तू मकर में मानसी मनावा चतलाए के, ओ पिंडी पंडित किशोर मार मांगती फगण में फुल माई जाई बरसाए के। यानी मेरे बाप गाकर पढ़ते थे। वो दीवा होता था, लाइट नहीं थी, ऐसे दवाखड़ी उसे बोलते थे, उसके ऊपर दीवा मिट्टी के तेल का, तो वो गा रहे हैं, सारी दिहाड़ी चढ़ाई का काम करते थे, बहुत ज्यादा मेहनत का, मगर उनको शौक था। हम उनके पेट पर बैठे हुए हैं, वो गा रहे हैं। तो मेरे 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 फादर से मेरे इर्द गिर्द, मेरे आसपास लिटरेचर ही लिटरेचर था, फिलोसफी ही फिलोसफी। मैं बहुत एलीट क्लास में पैदा हूँ, मैं ये कहता हूँ, मैं बहुत रिच खानदान का फर्जंद हूँ, बच्चा हूँ, मैं बहुत रिच। मेरे फादर, मेरे मदर, मेरे इर्द गिर्द इतने लोग, इतने रिच लोग, बहुत अमीर आदमी।
काली जी, आपकी अमीरी जो है में है वो मिलती है। और ये जो किताब ओरिएंट ब्लैक स्वान से छपी है, ट्रांसलेशन हुई है शांति पर्व की, मेरे ख्याल इसमें बहुत कुछ है जो हमारे रीडर पढ़ सकते हैं और जान सकते हैं। लेकिन एक मुझे यूनिक बात जो लगी थी शांति पर्व की टेक्स्ट जो स्टाइलिश इसकी थी कि 2 टेक्स्ट में होना, शायद ये अगर पूरे दुनिया की नहीं है तो एशिया की तो ये फर्स्ट एक्सपेरिमेंट मैं कह सकता हूँ। तो मुझे जब एज ए हिस्टोरियन या सोशल साइंटिस्ट कह लीजिए कि लिटरेरी टेक्स्ट को समझना है, तो कुछ डिवाइसेस होती हैं जिनमें समझा जा सकता है कि ये टेक्स्ट को क्या कहा जाए। तो मैंने पाया कि ऐसी टेक्स्ट एक अर्जेंटीना के बहुत बड़े लिखारी हुए हैं जिनका नाम था जूलियो कोर्ताजार। तो उनकी 1963 में ही वह अर्जेंटीना के थे, लेकिन फ्रांस में बस गए थे। उन्होंने 1963 में ये किताब रॉयला लिखी जो इंग्लिश में हॉप स्कॉच कहा गया। तो उसमें बड़ी चीजें उभर के आई जो मेरे को आपके नावल में नजर आती हैं। तो मैं उसको, ये जो मेरा आपके साथ इंटरव्यू हुई थी और पब्लिश हुई है, उसमें थोड़ा सा सेक्शन है जो मैं पढ़ के सुनाता हूँ फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ द लिसनर्स। तो ये जो ये किताब आई है जूडिथ मिसराही बराक की, के सत्यनारायण जो हमारे दोस्त भी हैं और हैदराबाद के ही हैं, आईफ्लू यूनिवर्सिटी के हैं, और निकोला थियारा जो है नॉटिंगम ट्रेंट यूनिवर्सिटी से हैं। उनकी किताब आई है दलित टेक्स्ट एस्थेटिक्स एंड पॉलिटिक्स रीइमेजिन्ड, जो रोटलेज इंटरनेशनल पब्लिशर्स 2020 में छापी गई। तो उसमें मैंने समझने की कोशिश की इस नावल को, इसी के तहत मैं बात कर रहा हूँ कि इसको हाइपर टेक्स्ट कहा जाता है। जिस तरीके का आपने टेक्स्ट इस्तेमाल की है ऊपर और नीचे, तो वो मैं कह रहा हूँ कि हाइपर टेक्सचुअल फिक्शन इज ए रिलेटिवली न्यू फिनोमेना इवन इन द वेस्ट। The Argentine French writer Julio Cortázar's 1963 Royola, written in Paris, has been called the first hypertext novel. Though the concept of hypertext hardly existed at the time, written in an episodic snapshot manner, the novel is not an engaging story. जैसे आपकी ऊपर वाले 16 एपिसोड्स हैं, शॉर्ट स्टोरीज हैं या इंडिपेंडेंट है, वो फ्रेगमेंटेड हैं, वो सारी चीजें स्नैपशॉट हैं. इट इज मोर ऑफ ए कैरेक्टर स्टडी. जो आप कह रहे थे ना, कैरेक्टरों के नीचे तक तय के जाना, or rather an elaboration of a philosophical position through the depiction of certain people in a particular place. तो जहाँ क्लेमेंट हैं, जो एक लिटरेरी क्रिटिक हैं, वो कहते हैं कि फिक्शन हाइपरटेक्स्ट है क्या. वो कहते हैं it is which makes it possible to distinguish it from arborescent narratives and pure combinations as well. The hypertext shares with the latter the notion of fragmented narrative units, but these fragments are neither totally structured like arborescent narratives nor organized like total combination text. तो ये दोनों चीजें नहीं. इस लिहाज से मैं कहता हूं कि आपकी जो ये नॉवल है, ये यूनिक है. ये वर्ल्ड का यूनिक होगा, मुझे ऐसा लग रहा है. ऐसा टेक जो स्टाइलिश जो है इसका कहने का और बांटने का, ये ऐसा हुआ नहीं है. The hypertext is therefore a collection of semi-organized textual arguments, fragments, textual fragments. But Clement does not bring in Deleuze and Guattari, though दोनों ही French thinkers हैं बहुत बड़े, और who philosophized arborescent along with its opposite concept rhizomes. ये दोनों बॉटनी की शब्द हैं. एक तो ट्रीज होते हैं जो उनको ऊपर खड़े हैं, जो वर्टिकल खड़े हैं. एक झाड़ियां होती हैं जिसको रिज्यूम्स कहते हैं. तो बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग है कि arborescent is a term of characteristic thinking marked by insistence on totalizing principles, binarism and dualism. कि ये सब ऐसे बांट दिए जाते हैं. The term comes from the way genealogy trees are drawn, and unidirectional progress with no possible retroactivity and continuous binary cuts. Rhizomes, on the contrary, mark a horizontal and non-hierarchical conception where anything may be linked to anyone else. तो वो जो linkages हैं आपके text में, आपके narrative में मौजूद हैं. With no respect whatsoever for specific species, they use the term arborescent, that is tree-like, to refer to post-enlightenment Western ways of thinking, acting and knowing. Such structures of thought are linear, hierarchical, vertical, fixed and deeply rooted. In contrast, rhizomes are non-linear, horizontal, non-centered, अनार्किक, नॉमिडिक जो आपके उसमें है कि आप में हायरार्की नहीं रखते, क्योंकि दलित कॉन्सेप्ट में हायरार्की हो नहीं सकती. इक्वालिटी आएगी, समानता आएगी, वो सारी चीजें हैं, एक दूसरे से लिंक्ड हैं. बहुत बड़ी बात कही है. Their rhizomes are defined by their connections rather than their roots and spread horizontally across times and space. Like trees, rhizomes do not have a defining form. They can take any shape or direction, and nodes can be connected to any other nodes. Transposing this image into how personhood might be conceived, we have an image that is one of multiplicity. As such, personhood can be seen as in a state of permanent becoming as nodes are added to the rhizome and new pathways navigated. मैं उसके बाद तुरंत एक लाइन आपके नावल के बारे में कहता हूँ. Kali's novel in this understanding becomes the first hypertext writing in India. आपको इसके बारे में कुछ कहना है? ये है तो
आप लोगों का काम है, इंटेलेक्चुअल्स का काम है. मेरा काम दो काम है. लोगों को देखना, सुनना, समझना और रोना.
हाँ,
और कोई काम नहीं.
मैं तो हमारा भी काम है. ठीक है,
मैं रोता हूँ, सच्ची बात है. मैं नहीं लिखता. ये कौन लिखा रहा है मुझसे? सुबह मेरे साथ कभी कबीर उठ खड़े होते हैं, कभी फरीद उठ खड़े हो. सुबह जब मैं उठता हूँ तो मेरे साथ कोई बुजुर्ग मेरा जो है ना, वो उठता है ऐसे साथ में. आज मैं उठा तो फरीद उठे मेरे साथ. फरीदा
वाह।
मन मैदान कर टोए टिब्बे ला, जे कोई मिल जाए बख्शिया तो तू भी बख्शिया जा।
क्या
वाह,
बात है, वाह।
बढ़िया।
उठ गया
तो गुजरात
फरीदा कोठे मंडप मारियां उसार दे भी गए, गए ओ मापियों गोरी आए पे, ओ कोठियां मंडप माड़ी सार कब्र च पै गए।
ओके।
हाँ यार, आज सारी दिहाड़ी फरीद है मेरे साथ।
वाह,
मैं उनसे आपसे भी बातें नहीं कर रहा, मैं फरीद से ही बातें कर रहा हूँ। और वो अपने गुरु को भी नहीं बख्शते। फरीदा जे जाना तिल थोड़े तो संभल बुक भरी, अगर तिल थोड़े हैं तो संभल कर बुक भरी, जे जाना 100 नडड़ा तो थोड़ा मान करी, जेड़ा है 100 गुरु पीर मुर्शिद नडड़ा तेन लगता तो माना करी बहुता। ओ माय गॉड फरीदा, आह गलिए चिक्कड़ दूर घर नाल प्यारे नेह, चला तो पिज्जे कंबली रहा तो टुटे नेह, पिज्जियो सिज्जियो कंबली तो अल्लाह बरसियो बेह, जाए मेला तिन सज्जना टुटियो नाही नेह। 10 घंटे बोली जाइए फरीदा। बुजुर्ग मेरे साथ हैं और मुझे कहते हैं कि ये लिखो, कोई लिखवाता है मुझसे, मेरे पास में नहीं है ये हाई टेक्स्ट क्या है मुझे नहीं पता। कोई कहता है कि ऐसा कर लिया, मैं अब पढ़ रहा हूँ इसको, माय गॉड ये किसने लिखा है, मैंने तो नहीं लिखा ये, मुझे भी ये कोई है। नेचर जो है ना, मेरा जो मानना है, जे सतगुरु नानक देव जी का भी मानना है कि सहस सियाणपा लख हो ता एक न चले। सियाणा आदमी ये नहीं लिख पाएगा, जिसको पता है हाइपर टेक्स्ट क्या होती है वो नहीं लिख पाएगा। ये तो नेचर जो है ना आप पर कृपा करती है, मुझे लगता है नेचर, पता नहीं शब्द भाग जाते हैं लोगों से, मैंने भागते हुए देखे, भाग जाते हैं। जैसे मैंने बताया ना, मैं छोटे आपके साथ बात कर रहा था, मुझे क्या बुत करने का शौक पै गया, मैं चक्की में गया, वहां से कुड़ ले आया, पत्थर उठा कर ले आया, छत हमारी कानों की बांस की छत जो होती है कच्ची छत, उसके ऊपर रख लिया। अब मैं पढ़ के आ रहा हूँ तो बुत काट रहा हूँ, टक 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 छेड़ी लगी हुई है, नीचे मदर मेरे बीजी जिसे हम बोलते हैं वो सो रहे हैं, आराम कर रहे हैं, थके हुए हैं, काम करते, पशु रखे हुए हैं, तो वो थके हुए हैं, ऐसा छितर पतान किया मुझे, तो मेरा भाग गया वो बुत काटा जो था, वो भाग गया। भाग जाते हैं, शब्द भाग जाते हैं आपसे, मगर अगर उसकी कृपा हो नेचर कहीं कहीं वो को तू ना विसार रामैया। नामदेव रोए होंगे, ये लोग नहीं मुझे डेरे में नहीं जाने देते, मंदिर नहीं जाने देते, जे शूद्र कहते हैं मुझको, ए पंडिया मुझे टेढ़ कहत है, टेढ़ नफरत करते हैं मुझसे, पर तू मत विसार। वो रोए होंगे, नामदेव रोया होगा, रैदास रोए होंगे। मोर मन जो बिगाड़ियो पल पल हर जीते अंतर पारियो, ऐसा पाड़ रहे ने जिमें मेरा अंदर, जत देखू तत दुख की राशि, अजो न पिताए निगम पै साखी, कहो रविदास कहो कैसे कीजे बिन रघुनाथ शरण काकी लीजे, तेरी शरण पैर में जाऊं, आ दुख है 24 घंटे मैनू अंदरों चोट रहा है। तो मैंने लगता हूँ मैं अब भी, मैं नया नावल मेरा आ जाएगा, फरवरी में आ जाएगा, और मुझे 8 साल लग गए उस नावल को, वो 200-250 पेज का नावल है, उसका नाम है ठहरो रात सौ लवे 2 घड़ी, रुक जाओ ठहरो रात को सोने, यानी रात को सोने नहीं दे रहा मेरी, इतने गंदे लोग हैं, ये रात को सोने दो यार, 1 मिनट। हमारे बुजुर्ग कहते थे जब शाम ढलती थी तो अरे दरख्त के पत्ते को मत छेड़ो, ये सो रहा है, उसको काटना तो दूर की बात है, उसको छूना, बच्चा छू लेता था तो माएं तड़प जाती थी। मैंने अपनी माँ को तड़पते हुए देखा, अरे अपने बच्चे को चांटा मार रही है वो, मतलब अरे मत छेड़ इसे, ये सो रहा है। और हमने सोए नेचर को बहुत नुकसान पहुंचा दिया, बहुत नुकसान। हमने हमारा ये जो चला गया है हमारे भीतर से, कहीं मर गया है। अरे सुन, मैंने जंगल को सोते हुए देखा है। ओह माय गॉड, कहाँ 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 बहुत सारी भयंकर आवाजें हैं, और हम दोस्त बीच में पैग लगा रहे हैं बैठे हुए। एकदम सुन्न बरत गई, पैग की आवाज आ रही है डालने की। ओह, मैं कहा यार नहीं 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 नहीं, हमने वहीं गिरा दे, और बिना आवाज से जंगल से बाहर आ गए। वो मेरी माँ ने बताया था कि अब ये सो रहा है, इसे डिस्टर्ब मत कर। मैं आदमी के मन में वो माँ जगाना चाहता हूँ जो वृक्ष के सोने पर अपने बच्चे को पीट सकती है कि तू इसे डिस्टर्ब क्यों कर रहा है। मेरा लिटरेचर जो है ना, वो मैं माँ जगाना चाहता हूँ इन लोगों के बीच में। मैं नामदेव जगाना चाहता हूँ जो रोए यार। कहीं कितने साल हो, मेरा एक पत्रकार दोस्त आया, मैं कहा यार कितने साल हो गए तेरे को रोए हुए। कहता तेरे को, मैं कहा रोज रोता हूँ। सुबह उठकर सबसे पहला काम ही ये करता हूँ, दुनिया को देखता हूँ, जब चिंतन में जाता हूँ, जब आज फरीद को देख रहा हूँ, फरीदा मन मैदान कर, अरे अपने मन को मैदान कर दिया, ऐसे साफ कर दिया, उसकी बख्शिश हो जाएगी, कोई मिल जाएगा तुझे तो तेरा भी पार उतारा हो जाएगा, तेरा भी खड़ा हो जाएगा। तो ये जो लिटरेचर है, ये जो संवेदना है जो मर गई है, ये जो सरकारों की देख रहा हूँ मैं, पॉलिटिकल लीडरों से अब मिल रहा हूँ, मैं पत्रकारिता कर रहा हूँ, मगर मैं आज तक पंजाब में इलेक्शन कवर कर रहा हूँ, मैं किसी लीडर से नहीं मिल पाया। वो रिपेल करते हैं मुझे, उनका भीतर से जो रेस निकलती है ना, वो कहती है दौड़ जा जहां से, तू यहाँ क्यों आ गया, है ना, भाग जा जहां से। यहाँ तुम्हारा हमारी इंटरव्यू दिखाओ अपनी बरकतम वेब टीवी पर, मैं जा नहीं पा रहा, मैं सच में नहीं जा रहा। मुझे एक भी आदमी नहीं मिला जिसके पास मैं जाऊं और उससे, हाँ कल मिले मुझे वो बलदेव सिंह सिरसा, किसान लीडर, सबसे बड़े किसान लीडर, सिंगू बॉर्डर पर रहे। कल मैंने उनको इंटरव्यू किया, मुझे आनंद आ गया। उनके चेहरे दमकता हुआ चेहरा, ऐसे जैसे कोई दरवेश हो, उसकी आवाज में ऐसी बुलंदी जैसे कबीर बोल, जाओ तू ब्राह्मण ब्राह्मणी जाया तो आन बाट काहे नहीं आया। इसी तरह गगन दमामा बाजे हो जा सूरा सो पहचानिए, जो लड़े दीन के हेत और पुरजा पुरजा कट मरे कभू न छाड़े खेत। इतनी बुलंद आवाज में उन्होंने, मैंने उनके साथ इंटरव्यू किया, मुझे अच्छा लगता है। तो मेरा लिटरेचर जो है, जो मैं चाहता हूँ यार किसी के भीतर वो माँ पैदा हो जाए, किसी पाठक के भीतर वो माँ पैदा हो जाए, किसी पाठक के भीतर नामदेव पैदा हो जाए, किसी के भीतर ही हो। That's why मैं
बहुत बढ़िया,
बहुत कृपा,
बहुत बढ़िया। देशराज जी, आपने जो संवेदना की बात की है और लेखक की संवेदना की बात की है, और जो दो तीन चीज आप जो बताए थे वो बिल्कुल दिल छूने वाली बात है। आपने बताया कि ऑब्जर्वेशन कोई बाहर की चीज नहीं होती, अंदर की चीज होती है। और तीसरा आपने जो बताया कि आप बहुत रिच है, क्योंकि आपका जो वेल्थ है, आपका जो रिचनेस है, वो कोई पैसों से नहीं है, लेकिन जो माहौल है उससे आपने अपने आप को बहुत रिच मानते हैं। ऐसे बहुत चीज दिल छूने वाली बात है। आप जो संवेदना की बात की है, कल रघुराय जी भी ऐसी एक बात बोल रहे थे कि कोई जो क्रिएटिव आर्टिस्ट होता है वो सोचता नहीं है, वो सिर्फ रेस्पॉन्ड करता है। जब कोई बात उनको छूती है वो रेस्पॉन्ड करता है। और जो ये ये जो सोचने की बात है, वो हम जैसे लोग, जैसे प्रोफेसर राजकुमार है, वो हम है, वो हम करते हैं, क्योंकि हम एटलीस्ट मेरे तो, वैसे आपके जैसे जो क्रिएटिव वो एनर्जी है वो तो हमें नहीं है। और जो लास्ट बात है जो आपने बताया, बहुत ही अच्छा था कि आप हर सुबह जब उठते हैं तो आपके साथ कोई, आपके बुजुर्ग आपके साथ उठते हैं, वो बहुत बहुत बढ़िया। राजकुमार जी, थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर दिस कॉन्वर्जेशन। देशराज जी, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आप हैदराबाद लिटरेरी फेस्टिवल आने को, और आपकी बात हमारे सामने रखने के लिए. Thank you so much, Deshraj ji and Rajkumar ji, and for
Thank you.
this was very, very touching. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we close the second session of this morning, and we will see you exactly in 5 minutes on the other side of the break. Thank you so much.
Dear friends, welcome to our next session, the third on the second day under the HLF 2022 banner on literature and films, titled Heroes and Villains. I'm happy to welcome Balaji Vittal and Kaveree Bamzai, who will be in conversation with dear friend Uma Magal. Balaji is a second-generation Calcuttan with his roots to the city dating back to 1950s. He, of course, lives in Hyderabad at this moment. By training, Balaji is an engineer, a graduate from Jadavpur University, Calcutta, and has worked in leading banks and organizations. He's the co-author of the national award-winning book, R.D. Burman, The Man, the Music, which was released in 2011, and the Mami award-winning book, Gata Rahe Mera Dil, 50 classic Hindi film songs that came out in 2015. His most recent work, his first singly authored book, is Pure Evil, The Bad Men of Bollywood, which has been released as recent as December 2021. Balaji, do please show us the book and let the viewers see what they must go and pick up at the earliest. Glad you joined us, Kaveree. We almost had you about 2 years ago. I think it was for your No Regrets.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that we are here today together. Welcome, Kaveree, who is an independent journalist with over 30 years at India Today, the Indian Express, and the Times of India. She was the first and is so far the only woman editor in the India Today. A member of CII, Women Empowerment Committee for several years, she is now a member of the jury of the Women Exemplar Awards of the CII and of the ISC FICCI Sanitation Awards. She's a change maker for Save the Children charity and a mentor for the KARM Fellowship. The book in question for today's discussion is her latest publication, which came out in 2021, The Three Khans and the Emergence of New India. Once again, Kaveree, I request you to hold up this book for our viewers. And dear friends, yes, lovely. Dear friends and our devoted audience, and thank you all for being here this morning. Please do pick up these books, pandemic or otherwise. Festivals go on, films go on, books go on, and they have to be bought as a hard copy to touch, and feel, and smell, which cannot be lost on digital devices. Please do pick up the books. In conversation with Balaji and Kaveree is Uma Magal, the owner of Fenugreek Productions. Uma, you're on screen? Yes. Productions, a boutique studio for media and film work and training. She's a writer, theatre and film actor, filmmaker, teaching theatre, film and media in the US and India. Presently, she is stationed in Ireland and currently deeply immersed in her work on the labor of love film for the rocks of Hyderabad, a passion project rooted in eco-grief at the destruction over the past decades. And this project, and of course the film, is titled The Other Kohinoor. Uma, I hope to present this next year at the next HLF. Look forward to this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Uma, for taking us through the works of Balaji and Kaveree over the next 35, 40, 45 minutes. I'll leave the stage to you three wonderful film people. I will, however, reappear about 10 minutes, 12 minutes before the close of the sessions in order to take the questions that may be posted in the chat box by our audiences. Thank you all for being here, and over to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amita. Thank you, everyone at HLF. So lovely to meet you, Kaveree and Balaji.
Thank you.
I really look forward to. I look forward to a really stimulating conversation with you all today. You know, via your books about Indian cinema. I had the pleasure of reading both your books in the past couple of weeks. Vijay sent me the PDF, and I was delighted to read it. It was a real immersion in, you know, two different windows, two lenses through which to come to Indian cinema and the industry. I was thinking I will start on a very light note, you know, just a fun question. bringing the trajectories of your two books together. You know, bad guys, villains, anti-heroes, and the three Khans. Yeah. So if y'all can just, you know, off the top of your head, it's not a serious question, tell me which is your favorite bad guy role or anti-hero role with the three Khans? Kaveree, you can start.
Difficult question. I would say anti-hero, surprisingly, I would say the Chulbul Pandey in Dabang. You know, I felt that he sort of redefined, Hindi cinema in the 2010s. And that whole gray area, you know, of who a hero is and who a villain is, he sort of he amalgamated both characteristics in himself. And I think that is really what the 2010s are all about, you know. Our moral compass is so skewed now that we really don't know who's a hero and who's a villain. So, you know, when we come to Balaji's book, I think we'll explore that in greater detail. And I think that's because society is in such a flux itself that it's so difficult. Moral, what is accepted as morality, as, you know, what is the right thing to do, all the virtues that we grew up with, honesty, ethics, all that has taken such a huge beating over the last few years. And I think it's exemplified in, you know, heroes such as the recent miniseries Scam 92, for instance. You know, Harshad Mehta, who was a villain, suddenly becomes a hero, you know. So our whole definition of who's a hero and who's a villain is really changing. So
yes, there's so much reinvention happening.
Exactly.
What about the other two
people? Even people, you know, I mean, people say, an Ambani maybe, you know, Dhirubhai Ambani maybe. I know it's controversial, but say 30 years ago, one wasn't sure exactly where to place him. Was he a robber baron, a carpetbagger? But suddenly you had Guru, and it sort of, you know, made him a hero. So I think that's something that's interesting. Yeah, I think for the other two, if you remember Earth, you know, Amir Khan in Earth, my God, I thought that was so diabolical, you know, and that chilling. And that last scene, I mean, I think you can just watch it again and again. It still, you know, gives you goosebumps. And of course, I think for Shah Rukh, I would have to say Bazigar, you know, what else? Because much more than Dar, which really was the stalker syndrome, which everyone has done to varying degrees, unfortunately. The Bazigar character, you know, where you have a rationalization for what he's doing, but still you empathize with him. I think that again is where, you know, you sort of start, your emotions start being manipulated. So those really are my three favorite anti-heroes.
Absolutely comprehensive, absolutely right on. Yes. Balaji, what would you say?
Absolutely, I mirror Earth, just that one line of dialogue, Andar hai wo. That's all that is there to his villainy. And he starts off a whole communal mob syndrome just because, you know, he doesn't get the girl and he's jealous of the girl. Just that one line.
Line, Balaji, it was, you know, it just sort of,
And then after that, he goes and sits on his haunches and keeps smoking a cigarette and watches with a loser satisfaction. You know? That is one. And in terms of Shah Rukh, once again, I think the darkest role was in Anjan, what he played, right? But that was maybe too gruesome, too grisly. I'll tell you, Bazigar and Dar, Bazigar was somewhere in the anti-hero zone, but more in the villainy zone. See, in Trishul, okay, if you say Amitabh Bachchan, he was the anti-hero, but they avoided collateral damage. If you look at Shankar Yadav Ki Barat, they avoided the innocents, but Ajay of Bazigar went after the innocents. See, he had no bone to pick with, the daughter and then her two classmates and all that. But he had lost that sense where he's so embittered with hatred that he just wants to get, cause the pain in the most gruesome way. So that way I would put him more in the villain zone. I think that's a fantastic portrayal. In Dar, he was actually a man-child. People actually sympathize. He's a sick boy. He's a sick man. Right? He's sick. So these were the roles. Salman, I'm not sure. Rather, if I can go outside the boundary and talk about the fourth Khan, Saif,
Yeah.
I think I love his performance in Ek Hasina Thi.
In Omkara.
Omkara, and before that, Ek Hasina Thi.
Yes.
He was a villain.
Yes. Yes.
So maybe I know I'm crossing the boundary of the 3 Khan, going to the 4th Khan, but
no worries.
He's a favorite of everyone's.
That was an icebreaker question, so we can cross any boundaries, and even otherwise, this is a very informal, free-flowing conversation.
But, Uma, Balaji is absolutely right. Not just Ek Hasina Thi, but that first line again of Omkara. Where you have this, wonderful Winchester-educated actor suddenly spouting these early abuses, and you think, hello, what's going on? And those bad teeth and that limp, and he makes that Iago character his own. It was
really
quite an extraordinary feat.
Absolutely. So I want to go back to to the beginning, if I can, not right a complete beginning, but Kaveree, your previous books on women and in modern India, in modern life, and another film on the Indian film industry, and Balaji, your previous book, which I was telling you I had the pleasure of picking up at kind of sociological, psychological perspective that you brought, with connecting it to various ways of us understanding our own reality. So how did that happen? What was that journey? Both of you could talk about it, and Kaveree, please go first.
Yeah, I think for me, Uma, it was really a very natural progression. I have spent the last 30 years in some manner or the other associated with films. Either I was a reviewer or I was a writer on films. So I have, and my journey really mirrors the Khan's journey as well. I began in journalism around the same time as they began their careers. So I always, in a way, have associated myself with them. That's my way of feeling important. But I felt that their journey also mirrors the journey of New India and how we've come to this point where, good or bad, we're a very different nation now. So I felt it was important to chronicle that, because sometimes in all the noise, in the social media noise, now you hear so much of back and forth of, either they're being sent off to Pakistan, or they're being trolled, or, they're being boycotted. I felt it was important for us to remember the joy that they brought to us with their movies, and they still continue to bring to us, but they genuinely, I think the 90s, we had very little, in the 80s, there was so little to be joyous about in Indian cinema, Now we can look back and laugh at some of those movies, but they were quite dreadful when we were growing up, and it was the tail end of Amitabh Bachchan's career, and he was doing horrendous stuff. And, these guys came in, and there's such a breath of fresh air. They were young, like we were young at that point. And I felt it was important for us to reconnect with that, and remember who we were and what we were as a nation as well. And I, of course, personally feel we were a much better nation. Maybe we had much, much less. We were poor. I think we were all poor compared to now. But I thought we were much, much richer in diversity and much richer in celebrating some of the differences that we have. And we were happy to live with them. I feel not so, I'm not as optimistic now as I used to be. So in a way, it was my way of acknowledging what they have contributed to the industry, what they have contributed to society, and they have contributed to making us who we are. And we have to, they have separate constituencies, and maybe we'll come to that later. But, Shah Rukh has an enormous constituency among women. I mean, they adore him. And there've now been books which have also chronicled this in, very well chronicled academically. Amir has an enormous constituency in the thinking middle class India, and Salman has a particular constituency, working class, young working class men who I think genuinely connect with him and feel if he, he's their bhai, he's the guy who will deliver them, help them, whatever. So I felt that it was my way of just acknowledging this journey and acknowledging their contribution.
Right. Sure. Balaji?
Well, the prospect of tracking the emergence, the relevance, and the nuances of the various genre of Bollywood villainy in the last 90 years was mouthwatering. So as soon as HarperCollins spoke to me about the contract, I said, let me sign it before you change your mind, right? Basically there are certain genre of villainy which have existed in certain decades and some which have been perennial. So the prospect of, first of all, unpacking the one big black box called villainy and taking the various goodies out of that box and hanging it in different hangers and putting it in neatly stacking it up, like hopefully some of this what you see behind me. So a logical segregation of those. And if I say that cinema mirrors life, then what social milieu or what changes in the social milieu caused the emergence of those villains, right? Before 1964 we didn't have a hakikat because the Chinese War happened in 62, right? The smugglers came because of the license Raj at some stage. Right. Keshav Mahindra made a statement saying after the British Raj came the license Raj. So that way also, if you see the very suave Ajit, he never say, hey, chokri idhar aa. He say, Mohtarama baithiye, aaram se baithiye, aapko koi takleef nahi hai. So that went in the 70s. What came in the 80s and hey, kya bolta rahe? It was the very Marathi, local Marathi or the South Indian guy like your Rama or so everything needed tracking, emergence, nuances, and all that. And I had to get into details because the devil or the evil lies in the details. So it promised to be a great journey, and it was a great journey, meeting a whole lot of people in the industry, and it was really fun writing it. So
fabulous.
That's why the book is relevant.
It sounds like a joy. I mean, for both of you, it sounds like it was a delightful.
And one complement the other, because the more badmash the heroes, the villain is, the hero looks good. Yeah. So so if you look at both the books,
we come to that. I have a question for you.
In fact, Balaji, that's very interesting that you say that. I remember once Salman telling me that he always made sure that the villain who was cast opposite him was much taller and much bigger. And I said, but why? He said, but that's how I look like a hero, because I'm bashing him up. If he was the same height or the same build, I would not look heroic. So I found that you're so interesting,
Yeah. Uma, you were saying something.
Absolutely. No, I will ask you more about what you were just mentioning. What I was thinking of was maybe I could go from one question to Kaveree and then one to you from now on. Yeah. So that, and I see that we're at, time is of the essence here. So Kaveree fandom, in reading your book, I really felt that one of the foundations of it was the relationship that fans in India have with these stars.
Yeah.
That's really a crux of the whole thesis. And so I was wondering what your take is on that, on what our relationship is with our stars, how is it different from others, and how have you presented that, in the book?
I think we have such an emotional connect with our actors. And when we have that, that's what makes them stars. We have such fine actors. Not everyone is a star. But when you have that emotional connect, for instance, say with Rajesh Khanna, who unfortunately I don't talk about that much in the book. I wish I had now. Maybe that's something for later. It was such a short burst, but it was so intense. I was just talking about it the other day, 1969 to 1973, and poof, it's gone, and then suddenly this long, tall man comes, his long legs, and, we fall in love with him in Zanjeer, because the times were such. There's so much of ferment and so much of frustration out there. And here was one man who seemed to embody it all in his brooding silence, So for us, I think that emotional connect we have with our actors, and that is so ephemeral. But once we establish that is what makes them a star. And that's what we feel. We will die for them. We will stand outside their bungalows. We'll wait outside for a darshan every Sunday. We will follow him to jail, follow him back, wait for him to wave outside from the balcony at Galaxy at us or Mannat. We will, it's just so, it just cannot be contained. And I think we saw that Uma, when Aryan Khan was detained for the drug case, the outpouring of sympathy for his father, it was just quite tremendous, despite the fact that, here was a young man who was arrested for possession or whatever of drugs. The outpouring of sympathy for this man whom they'd grown up with and, who they saw as his family man, his ideal Rahul, that was very important. And I thought that was very interesting. I think that nerve, that chord that these people touch in us is what makes them stars. And it could be anything, but they have these loyal, constituencies, which is a little different, I think, Balaji, from the South, right? That fandom in the South is of a different order. That is almost like a religious fervor, and of course it is built by the kind of fan clubs that they have as well. We mustn't forget that there's, that fan club system that they have in the South, which contributes to that, which is not so prevalent in Bollywood. So I think that emotional connect is very important, and different constituencies, as I said, they have, which connect with them really at a very intimate level.
Right. And if you could talk a little bit more, push that and tell us how the book sort of helps us negotiate all this this time period that you've talked about.
Yeah.
Through that.
Yeah, because what I've tried to show, Uma, is that the India that we grew up with, liberalization, Mandal, Mandir, those 3 M's that I talk about, there was so much confusion, there was so much aspiration. We needed to find some way to negotiate all this. And I felt that through these 3 Khans, we were able to negotiate different aspects of our very quickly changing lives, and that is where they managed to establish that connect with us. And we felt that we were growing up with them, and we were learning how to, be NRIs. We were learning how to be, aware of social issues like Amir, or we were learning how to be, the small town guy was learning how to be a big man in the big city, like after Dabang, which Salman managed to do. So I felt that they were able to help us negotiate this. And I think that is why they created very loyal fandoms, which continue to support them. And despite all the problems, and, we know about the new kind of trolling that happens, the new kind of, boycotts that are called for, and all sorts of things. Despite that, it continues. And I think that is a leftover, I think, of the 90s.
Right. Thanks. Yeah. I could literally see that flow on the page as I was reading your book,
Yeah.
Balaji, I'm going to bring you back to what you started to talk about, the villains and the, why are villains so alluring, And I want to ask you, you have this great, Sriram Raghavan has a great introduction. You have that for your book. And, I want to make sure I have that quote right. So I will just, so he says, quoting from John Huston's work and film, after all, crime is only a left-handed form of human endeavor. It's fabulous, just fabulous. I thought if you could just, expand on that, and take us to your book through that.
See, why we find them so alluring is because, one, they don't have to follow any rules. They don't have to be good, right? They bring out that part of the one which is hidden somewhere deep within us. I mean, if we had no rules to follow, wouldn't that be fun, right? I mean, isn't it fun breaking a traffic rule, jumping a red signal? It gives us so much of thrill. Just imagine how much more fun it would be. I mean, for the wrong reasons, of course, right? So somewhere the villains, we see that forbidden part of ourselves on screen, and they make the hero look good. If you watch Scarface, it says you need me to make you look good.
Mm-hmm.
And they've always had to rediscover themselves. I mean, the names can't be a Ravi or a Rajesh or a Vijay, right? It has to be Big Hardy. It has to be Mogambo. It has to be some name.
Shakal.
Right? Shakal, and there were 2 Shakals,
yeah.
right? And so, they have to bucket themselves in, gaudy colors and check suits and bayonets and weird hats. And there's Prem Chopra turning up in head to toe in the same color in different scenes, same colored costume, same hat, same colored everything. Now, that's like a silly fancy dress show, but the fact is it works for them, right? Can break any rule. So that's what makes them alluring. And that's what, one more thing. Now, Kaveree has gone deep into the personal lives of the three heroes, but do we really often go into the personal lives of a Prem Chopra or a Ranjit or a Pran? We don't, because their on-screen persona itself is where our whole exploration stops. It's good enough for us to know what they are on screen, right? What a Raka is, what a Gabbar was, right? Amjad Khan was a great patriot, right? But nobody knows about it. People know that Salman is a great philanthropist, but they don't know how good a man Amjad Khan was, okay? Because the screen persona is where our exploration stops, okay? So that is why there's so much of enigma about them. There's so much of things to learn about them and what their contribution, because imagine a person sacrificing himself at the end of the 3-hour show so that audience may go home happy.
Yep.
And also, yeah, sorry, no, carry on.
Can I push you a little more on that? The sidekicks of the villain. You talk beautifully about that. It's really one of the most interesting parts I found in the book, among many parts. The Shetties, the guys who just say yes, boss, and Jihao on the sidelines, and we never, we sort of register them all. They're always there, but we don't pay attention, even less attention than what you're saying about the villains and getting into their personal lives, like the way we get into the superstars, right? And the heroes. So how hard was it in your book? You've devoted time to them, and it's wonderful. How hard was it to collect this material on this much ignored section of the story? And and the second part of that is, you say that they all had pretty, tragic lives. They didn't really do very well. What was it that held them back? They were actors. They had a presence. A person like Shetty, I remember him even now from my childhood. He was such a presence.
Yeah.
Why didn't they go ahead? I mean, what held them back? So if you could address both parts, first about the sidekicks and, generally how hard was it to get information and how did you bring it all together? And then secondly, about personally, what happened? Why didn't they do better? They're good they're actors, they're part of this industry. What held them back like that so much?
The script. The script was biased because any one of them could have had the same traumatic childhood as what Vijay of Diwar had, right? The fact is, they became thugs. They became the foot soldiers. Even Vijay of Diwar starts off as a foot soldier. And then he grows big because the story focuses on him. The script favors him. The script is sympathetic to him. Whereas a Shetty or a Mac or a Zabisco or a, those sorts of guys, somewhere the script said, you just make that one scene appearance, fight a bit, get beaten up a lot, get out, finish, right? It was a script. Who knows if people had given serious roles to Shetty or a Mac Mohan. And Mac Mohan, the couple of roles that he did are very well remembered. For example, the role in Saste Zakham, where he has this interminably long, he has a big name that nobody can pronounce. The police says, okay, okay, so what do we write down? So he has played some very interesting roles. Bob Christo, in fact, Bob Christos was maybe one of the few persons who had a documented biography and read his book on that. And he had a story where in the fight scene with Amjad Khan, he gets locked up and people lost the key to the handcuff, right? He gets tied and they had to call a locksmith and break open the lock. So these are, I'm sure there are many more stories of Shetty and all that. So, but that's not very well chronicled. Right. It's strange, as you said. If they had been given the chance and people had taken them seriously as actors, right? Who knows? It might have been a different story altogether.
Right.
Absolutely. I just wanted to add to that. Sorry, Mike.
No, go for it. Go ahead.
But it's so interesting that Balaji says that. For instance, if Bhiku Matre was not the focus of Satya, how would that film have turned out? But he was a villain for all intents and purposes. If in Company, Ajay Devgan's character was not the focus, how would it have turned out? So I think that's very interesting when he says that the script is written in such a way that Bhiku Matre looks like the hero of Satya, whereas he's not. I mean, he's a bad guy, but it's just the way the story is written. The times also, the times are such that suddenly what was bad 30 years ago, business was bad, socialism was the key, business was bad, capitalism, profit was a bad word. But now profit is not a bad word. Being an industrialist, being a startup guy, suddenly you have so many movies with startup guys as heroes, young guys like Rajkumar Rao play these guys. It was unimaginable, say, in the 80s, profit, making money, these were all considered very uncool things. So it's also how society changes, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to come back to you, Kaveree, with this question, which, it really struck me when I read it in your book. It's in the chapter Split Nation, Divided Stars. And you quote the scholar Radhika Subramaniam, analyzing the culture of suspicion post the Mumbai blast. And I'm going to just read the quote. The deep emancipatory potential of the urban modern, which spoke to new visions of community, independence, and freedom, was shattered. The city of many citizens was transformed into a city of strangers, marked by the ubiquity of evil. Could you talk a little bit about what drew you to this quote? It's really profound. I mean, I was really struck by it. And is this loss of the potential of the modern only increasing now? It's so, could you give us a window into how the book sees this play out, in the Khan films, like, and you yourself start with the Shah Rukh in this chapter, talking about all this. So maybe you could talk about Shah Rukh, and if we have time, we can go to the other Khans. But
I think, in fact, I want to come back to Satya. Satya begins with the quote. There's this man who's come to this city. We don't know his name. He's come to this city. It's a story of a migrant, basically. And in the last 2 years, in the pandemic, the first lockdown, we saw the migrant. And the migrant was not who we had imagined. The migrant was a man, a woman, a child. We had this image of this migrant as this man who's come from the village, works in all the buildings that we have, in all the homes that we have. So I felt that the idea of the Indian as a migrant is really something that Satya brought to us most deeply. But in a way, so did Shah Rukh, because here was a man who's coming from Delhi, comes to this city where he doesn't seem to know anyone, and makes it his own and becomes the king of the city in a way. Amitabh Bachchan does that journey a few years earlier, a couple of decades earlier, but he is someone who has some connection with privilege. You see him as part of the extended Nehru Gandhi Parivar. Shah Rukh seemingly comes with nothing but education. Comes with St. Columba's, comes with the Hansraj College, comes with Jamia, which a degree which he never completed. He is us. He is us with education as our only source of mobility. And he embodies this urban migrant, and which is why his stardom is so apart from his movies. When you look at the last 5 years, his movies have been disasters, but his stardom doesn't falter, because for us, he's not just Rahul or Raj. He is Shah Rukh Khan. He is this man who's come from nowhere, is an orphan, comes to this city, makes it his own, says he will conquer it, conquers it, builds one of the, in a way, a kind of a monument. It is virtually, on the urban landscape of the city. So what is it about him? And I think it is that quality of migrant, which all of us are in a way now in this new India. I think 60% of India really is urbanized. It's no longer the village that is the center of our consciousness. The urban landscape is, and the migrant is. And I think that is the quality that I wanted to capture with that quote. And I felt that captured it the best. And in the 90s, it really was, in the 80s and 90s, problem in Mumbai really was about the migrant. I mean, the Shiv Sena arose because of the migrants, you know. So I felt so many things were sort of, you know, coalesced in that. But you know, when you talk now, it's maybe something that we need to study afresh, you know,
and absolutely work towards
the city and the stardom, you know.
The
city and the star is a very interesting relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it was very moving, you know, to read that and the way you connected it. You know, that lost potential of the urban modern to build new communities, new freedoms, and to give us that new.
It doesn't. We just go back to that old sense of identities and our caste and our class. You know, there was so much. The 90s was it was a sense of everything that we had thought of Nehruvian India was just collapsing in front of our eyes. And we were so helpless. We were not able to do anything about it. When we look at us now, so much of what we are now is because of what happened in the 90s, the movements, you know, and we were going to build a new identity for ourselves, which was pure Indian, pure urban, pure modern. It didn't happen. We just deepened our divides. And that is really the tragedy of modern India, I feel.
Yes, I was really, really struck. Thank you for, you know, bringing that in your book. I hope people see it and we learn to do better, really. Balaji, I'm going to go to a lighter question with you. Let me just, so, you know, there's some great lines in your book. I was chuckling away, yeah. I especially like, I'll read out a few that I like. Sure. Where there is a will, there is a kill. Okay. The chapter title, fantastic. The chapter title, Pati, Patni or Who. And incurs the leading lady with a driving license to kill. Your lovely pun on, you know, biopics on the cult status villains. And, you know, when you spoke of Nicha Nagar, you used quietus, a word for death, which I had to look up, and thank you for increasing my vocabulary. I just really, really enjoyed it. And the thought came to me, and this question is for both of you, and I see Amita is back as well. Both of you, if you could tell us, who are the writers who you like, who influenced your actual writing style? We've talked about the content, we've talked about the industry as much as we could in this much time, but the writing itself, if both of you could talk, Balaji, you could start, and then Kaveree, you could end it, yeah?
Frederick Forsyth for me, because he always seems to bring out the climax in the epilogue, right? You're left hanging suddenly, right? What happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? And then it comes out in the epilogue. So you're like hanging on to every word in every chapter. So if there's one person you could pick and say that I was influenced, second is Robin Cook. Look at I'm sorry. Robin Cook, of course, and Arthur Haley.
Yeah.
He's my god when it comes to research. I don't think anyone can do a better research than Arthur Haley. My god. I wish I could be at least 1% of him. I think I'll be grateful to God for that. So these have been my influences.
Okay.
Uma, for me, very quickly, just Pauline Kael. In terms of writing, nobody can be better than her. Her wit and, you know, the fact that she took a position on her movies and, you know, she decided, she told you, okay, I like this because of this. I don't like this because of this. You know, there was no wishy-washiness, no wimpiness. She was out there. She was bold. She said it like it was. I love her. And I think, you know, I continue to read you know, all her books, and I find them so wonderful. So for me, I think she's the god of film writing.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And Balaji, all your writers are my favorite mystery writers and, you know, writers as well. So terrific.
I can share an anecdote about the Pati Patni or Who. If time permits today.
Please, it's fantastic.
Okay, I'll have to give the credit to Bill Gates because actually the title of the chapter was Pati Patni or Who. Sorry, Pati Patni or Wo. But when I kept typing Wo, W-O-H, it would autocorrect to Who. And I said, that's not a bad idea at all. So
fantastic. I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
That is beautiful, and as has been the whole conversation. Thank you, Uma, for making it such a lot of fun, relaxed, and you have covered so much. There is a whole lot happening in the chat box. I'll pick out a few questions, and there are a few people who are, managing a parallel conversation right there, which is great fun. You must go back and read them all. But there is a question from Gaza Nafar Ali. I don't think I got that right, but thank you, Ali, for asking this question. Bollywood heroes and villains are either black or white. Why can they not be grays? When will this change? When will they become real people like in the real world? Question to either of you. Or both
I think it's changing now, Amita. And I think, as I said, when you take a movie, take a web series like Scam, 92, or when you take something like Sacred Games, I think that notion of what is evil, who's good, who's bad, that's changing. I think it's not that it's not. I think with the movies, it'll take a little bit of time. But when we saw someone like Khilji in Padmavat, he is the hero of his own movie, which is going on in his head. But for us, he's the villain, But there is some justification for what he thinks he's doing, right? So I think that whole notion is shifting. And I see it most consistently in, all the web series that you see now, where people are not quite sure who's good, who's bad. Balaji, maybe you have a thought on that.
Sidhartha ji in Hazaro Khwaishein and, your Khurram Mir in Haider, two roles essayed by K.K. Menon, show a very, very two different points of view. We can forever be discussing whether they are right or wrong.
Right.
And we'll only have to conclude that they were right in their own right, though it didn't all that right? Because they had justifications, they had reasons for doing what they were doing or what they were not doing. So it lends itself to many shades of gray. So I would agree with Kaveree, the gray man is already here and now. I think it somewhere started in the late 90s, right? And so I think that's a good thing that has happened now.
Yeah.
That we've got a lot of this. In fact, there's a chapter, the sub-chapter in a book called The Grey Ensembles, which began way back in Parak, right? Everyone is grey, or even Pyasa, it's a grey ensemble, right? Or Jagte Raho, they were all grey ensembles. And then you had, of course, Jani Bhi Do Yaro and all that grey, the entire city is grey and all that. So the grey hero, the grey man is here and now.
So I suggest, Ali, you should pick up the books and read through them, because there are the grays that are visible. You're right. Particularly the OTT has changed that quite drastically. Ravi Kasinathuni is asking, is the evolution of the bad guy, the anti-hero, the villain, been different in regional cinema? I mean, that's not something that your books are covering, but would you like to say something? And he's referring to the Tamils in the Malayalam cinema. Is that different from the Hindi cinema?
I'm not very sure. I've watched Tamil films. I haven't watched too many Malayalam films.
So in the Tamil films, is that something that you can talk about?
Well, Tamil films, yeah, of course. I mean, somewhere the Hindi and Tamil have run, side by side. For example, there has been the equivalent of Amitabh Bachchan in the roles that Rajnikant played, right? And Rajnikant started like a Ranjit, right? Yeah. If you look at, your Padinar Vaidinile, he actually plays a rapist who tries to rape Sridevi in the end. And in another movie called Our Girl, he actually psychs out the woman. He taunts her and taunts her and taunts her, pushes her to right up. So there has been instance of Rajnikant turning over from a totally bad guy to a good guy, and Kamala Hassan has played so many grey roles. He played Sirapuru Jakal, which was the original of Red Rose. So there he was a serial killer. Again, he plays a good guy. Also, if you look at films like Vishwarupam, which got stalled and then released, so you'll see there are subtle shades of grey in that. I think Kamala Hassan has been more prone to playing those roles because Rajnikant became the ultimate good guy in the 90s, right? He became the Salman Khan of South, who's the god of one man, right? But then I can say Kamala Hassan was like the equivalent of maybe Amir Khan.
Yeah.
You know, who is that character? There is no
Yeah.
Kamala Hassan anymore. Just that there is no Amir Khan once the movie starts.
Right.
Right. There is only the actor on screen that you see.
So the character of a villain or the bad guy have been running parallel, I suspect, with the Hindi cinema and the regional cinema. But perhaps this to you, Kaveree, is there in the books that you have, is there a bad woman? Is there a anti-heroine roles that we can talk about? And I think it's very pertinent because very frequently, just the fact that she's in a bar or holding a glass of wine would probably turn her into the bad woman, right?
Yeah.
So how do you juxtapose the villain versus a female bad woman?
Yeah, I think we've come a long way in that vamp heroine distinction. You no longer have that distinction because all the markers of the vamp, the drinking and the smoking and the dancing and wearing tiny clothes, or, all that the heroine is doing now. So, and it's all acceptable because norms have changed. We've come to accept these things as not being typical of the bad woman. So I think that is very interesting. That's why you no longer have the vamp. You very rarely have the vamp. And I think that's a function of the fact that we've come to accept these things as normal. Again, society has changed, so we've decided that women who smoke, drink, have extramarital affairs, say in Cocktail, the woman does that. Deepika Padukone in Geraya, she's again an adulteress, so to speak. But this is no longer vampish behavior. We're quite okay with it. So I think that change has happened.
If I can just add to that,
yes,
in my book, I have covered a whole lot of femme fatales and the woman villain.
Simi being the ultimate femme fatale. My God, in Curs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Driving License to Kill.
Yeah,
Driving License to Kill.
Anglicized, earlier, like the Saira Banu of Pura Bird Paschim. The first half, she's almost vampish, right? Because she's blonde and she wears mini skirts and she's dancing and she's drinking, and then suddenly becomes, a sari wearing heroine at the end and is morally redeemed by Bharat,
And in my book, there are young second wives who are trying to kill their aged husbands for the money, right? There are those Sauteli maas and there are those, Jai Santoshi maa wali do badi bahu, right? The badi and the majli bahu, and or there is a villainous daughter-in-law trying to throw their mother-in-law out.
Yeah.
Or the psychotic, even Simi, the psychotic villain in Chalte Chalte, she played that. It came way before Curse, right?
Yeah.
Or you have Urmila Matondkar playing the completely unhinged serial killer in your Con.
Yeah.
In Ram Gopal Verma's film, right? So we've had various shades of those women villains covered in the book, and there are many of them, and they are very interesting. They are very.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. You say that.
In fact, there's a chapter called Mehendi Rang Lagi, blood on her hands.
because sorry, Kaveree, you were going to say something.
No, for instance, Khoonberi Mang in the end, when she's actually taking her revenge, is she being a villainous or is she just doing what all of us really wanted to do to Kabir Bedi? So again, those are very interesting things that have happened and have shaped, I think, the representation of women and made us more accepting of the flawed woman, and thank God.
Right? That's very true. Very true, Kaveree, because these are sensibilities and sensitivities which impact and that's it. The janta which comes to the cinema goes back, and I mean we know, for example, that the hero would whistle and catch the woman he does eve teasing to all the film, and that was considered heroic and something acceptable. Is this Saas Bahu role also something that's acceptable? And do we touch upon through these villainous characters the sensibilities and sensitivities of what should or should not be. That's a very fine line. So
right, and I think Amita, it's very interesting that I think a lot of the vampish behavior has been transferred to the screen, to the small screen, in domestic politics. I don't know if Balaji will agree with it, but the domestic politics, the kitchen politics of the Kyunki era, where suddenly you were able to identify the evil sister-in-law, the scheming bhabhi or the scheming daughter-in-law. So a lot of that got transferred to the small screen. So I think the big screen heroines were free to be themselves, free to
drink and
free to do what a lot of us do.
Wonderful. I think this definitely calls, Numa, you and I will remember this, calls for another session in another festival where we must look at the bad women concept and
absolutely. It'll be a rocking panel.
It'll be super.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. There's one last question that I would like to raise before we wrap up, and we are already a minute or two above our scheduled time. Do you think these bad boys and these villains have fun on the sets, doing what they're doing? Do you think it's kind of a release and fun?
From what they've told me in interviews, absolutely yes. I think they really enjoy it. And their co-stars love them. Even someone like Ranjit, he said no heroine has thrown a tantrum at the number of on-screen rapes that I've done. Never has there been anything embarrassing. Horrible character on screen, but what a gentleman. If you read the book, there was actually a wardrobe malfunction in one of the rape scenes. Okay. And it was Ranjit who saved her modesty. He said, switch off all the lights. Right. And he brought a blanket and covered her and all that. So he was the one who saved her modesty. And he was about to rape her a few minutes back when the lights were on. So they've really had fun, and
I remember from your book, Balaji, the scene I think you described Hema Malini and
spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
No, it's a fun thing. I don't think it'll spoil anything. There's a song with Hema Malini and Dharmender, and Pran talks about how Prem Chopra talks about how he, Hema Malini is dancing with him and singing just to make Dharmender jealous.
Raja Jani, yeah.
He's following around, hiding, ducking behind pillars and seeing when does Prem Chopra touch Hema Malini and all this stuff is going on. And then Prem Chopra in the song, he says he just started doing this bizarre dance. And everybody on set was laughing. So your book sort of, speaks to what Amita is saying exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Kitna maza aa raha hai, that Gana.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Uma, for leading this session into an absolute fun and, as I say, relaxed conversation where we really find out and get excited to pick up both these books. Thank you, Kaveree. Thank you, Balaji, for this conversation, for participating in HLF 2022. Look forward to more such meetings together. Dear audience, I know you may want to catch a bite, but the next session is wonderful. Catch a plate in the next 6-7 minutes that you have, but join us because there will be an audio play part of the Youngestan Nukkad. Thank you so much, Kaveree, for being here.
Much.
Balaji.
I love the session. I love being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
described citizen driven. All of us who have worked to bring this festival out are people from within your all discussions and an amazing audience. It's great to do this HLF. Thank you. HLF rock! Come rain or sunshine, HLF goes on!
बच्चों, प्यारी बहनें और भाई लोग, अब आपको एक अनोखा कार्यक्रम पेश करने के लिए जा रहे हैं। सस्ते जहाज के सपने। ये एक ऑडियो प्ले है, यानी कि इसमें वीडियो नहीं होगा। आप आंखों को आराम देके आराम से इस सपने के जहाज पर सैर करते रहिएगा। So as they say, sit back, close your eyes, and enjoy the audio play experience. Let me introduce to you the director of this play, Devika Das. By profession is a content writer, an author, and a poet. Her passion, though, seems to be theatre. She has more than 15 years of experience in theatre and has worked with several theatre groups across India. She has also acted in award-winning short films directed by Anshul Sinha and participated in Annapurna International School of Film and Media projects. Some of her notable performances include Jadhi Pucho Sadhu Ki, Kamla, Sipahi Ki Maa, No Jhakhu Hill, Jaaj Padtal, Comrade Godse, Khamosh Adalat Jari Hai, and a few Telugu plays. Currently, she's a member of the Nishumbita School of Drama and the director of Navarasa, the theatre wing of the nation's rock beat. This production is part of Youngistan Nukkad of the Hyderabad Literary Festival 2022, performed live by Navarasa and has been produced by the nation's rock beat. Over to you, Devika Das and crew, presenting Saste Jahaz Ke Sapne.
And plug in earphones to have a better sound experience. And Navarasa presents Saste Jahaz Ka Sapna.
अरे बेगम, अरे जरा सुनो, इधर आओ जरा।
क्या है जी? मैं किचन में बिजी हूँ। वही सेज बोलो, क्या काम है आपका?
अरे तुम 2 मिनट के लिए आओ यारो, एक जबरदस्त खबर छपे सो है अखबार में।
मैं सुबह सुबह अखबार पढ़ी तो सलमान को स्कूल के लिए देर हो जाती और आप भी ऑफिस लंच के टाइम पे पहुंचते हैं।
अरे तुम जरा आओ जी, देखो अखबार में ऐसी खबर छपी सो है ना, अगर बात सही निकली अपन के सपने पूरे हो जाते।
देखो, मेरे बचपन की सपने की बात तो नक्को करो आप। जब से शादी करके आई, एक भी सपना पूरा नहीं करे तुम, इसलिए अब सपना देखना ही छोड़ दी, ना उनको याद कर दी। अब एक सपना मैं बहुत दिन तक देखी कि मैं इंटर पास कर लूं, पर घर के काम में इतने हैं, इस चक्कर में वो सपना ही टूट गया। अब तो मेरा सपना मेरा बेटा पूरा कर दो, आपसे तो उम्मीद ही नहीं है मेरे।
अरे अरे बेगम जरा आहिस्ता बोलो जी, आहिस्ता। हाँ, वो कई को तुम आस पड़ोस वाले को मेरा बायोडेटा दे रहे। अरे इतनी मेहनत से मैं 3 बार में इंटर और 5 साल में बीए पास हुआ, अब तुम्हारे कहने में फिर से ये इंटर लिखना क्या? हाँ
अब्बा जल्दी क्या है कि बोलो, कई को पुराने बातें कर रहे। गैस पे दाल चढ़े सो है, जल गई तो बच्चा बिना खाया चला जाता। अब बोलो क्या है कि
हाउ ये देखो जी, एक बार अखबार में लिखे सो है कि लटविया के कुछ साइंटिस्ट लोग 2 सीटर जहाज बना रहे, जो हल्का और छोटा है। उसकी कीमत सिर्फ 60 लाख के थे। फायदे का सौदा दिख रहा है मेरे को तो एकदम।
ये लो, खाली बड़े बातें तुम्हारे। मैं कल से पेपर बंद करवा दे रही हूँ। 1 अप्रैल निकले को कितने महीने हो गए और ये लोग आज अप्रैल फुल बना रहे। मेरा खाना जल रहा, अब फुक्कर में बैठे सो है, आप ही पढ़ो। 10 मिनट बाद जब पानी चला जाता ना, फिर काली बाल्टियों को देखना। मैं जा रही हूँ। अल्लाह जाने कैसा ऑफिस है इनका। 12 बजे कौन खोलते हैं ऑफिस? अभी फिर हसन भाई भी आ जाते महफिल जमाने को। अल्लाह।
10वीं पास। जब भी जहाज ऊपर से जाता तो आंगन में बैठ के इन्हीं को जहाज देखना है। अब जहाज इतने सस्ते में मिल रहा तो अखबार बंद करवाते कहते। क्या है कि इन लोगों का।
सुनिए, जरा सुनिए, घंटी बज रही है ना, दरवाजा तो खोलिए, हसन आया शायद।
हो अरे आओ यारो हसन, आओ आओ। सलाम वालेकुम।
अरे वालेकुम अस्सलाम अब्दुल भाई,
कैसा चल
कैसा चल
रहा
रहा
सब?
सब?
अरे
सब
बढ़िया।
बढ़िया।
बच्ची को छोड़ के आया स्कूल?
हाउ छोड़ के आया, छोड़ के आया। और क्या खबर छपे सो आज अखबार में?
अरे तुम आओ जी, बैठो, ये लो पान लो।
अरे शुक्रिया मियाँ, शुक्रिया।
हाँ तो क्या बोल रहे थे?
मैं पूछ रहा था कि ये आज अखबार में क्या खबर छपे सो है?
अरे अम्मा, ये यारो ये डेली धमाका अखबार आए दिन कुछ ना कुछ धमाका करते रहता। अरे तुम बोलो भाई, ये 60 लाख में हवाई जहाज मिलता क्या कहीं तो भी? ये खाली बैगन के बातें करते ही लोग।
क्या बोल रहे यारो? 60 लाख में हवाई जहाज कौन देते? कौन बना रखी? कहाँ लिखे सो? जरा जरा दिखाओ मेरे को भी।
अरे हाउ लो, तुम भी पढ़ो। ये सबसे ऊपर वाले पन्ने में लिखे सो है, अब 60 मिलेंगे हवाई जहाज।
अम्मा क्या खाक पढ़ूं? चश्मा तो घर पे ही भूल गया मैं। अच्छा तुम तो ऑलरेडी पढ़ लिया ना खबर। तुम बताओ यारो क्या लिखे सो है पढ़ के।
बहुत नखरे हो रहे थे आजकल। भाभी को विशेष पहचान लेते पर अखबार पढ़ने को चश्मा ना तुम्हारे को। हाँ
अम्मा तुमसे कितनी बार कहा कि मेरी दुखती रगों पे पाँव नको रखा करो, तुम समझते ही नहीं ना तुम।
अरे अरे दुखती रग पे हाथ रखा जाता है यारो, पाँव नहीं हाथ।
अब्बा एक ही बात हुई यारो, हाथ रखो या पाँव, दर्द तो होता ना कैसा भी।
चलो जाने दो, ये सब तो अच्छी खासी भाभी को बदनाम कर रहे तुम।
जान दो तुम ये अपने हवाई जहाज का बोलो यारो, इतना सस्ता कौन बना रही?
हाँ सुनो, एक देश है लतविया, वहां के कुछ साइंटिस्ट लोग सस्ता हल्का और टिकाऊ जहाज बना रहे थे। वो रहता कुछ $9,000। हाँ उसको अपन 70 से गुना किए तो अपनी करेंसी करीब करीब 6.5 लाख होती, और बाकी ऊपर से टैक्स वैक्स मिला तो 7 लाख होता बस।
हाँ बात तो तुम ठीक कर रहे हो, पर मेरे को तो ऐसा यकीन ही नहीं हो रहा इतना सस्ता हवाई जहाज बनाते ये लोग।
हाँ भाई बात तो तुम्हारी बिल्कुल ठीक है, पर क्या है ना, साइंस बहुत तरक्की करी ना आजकल, तो कुछ भी हो सकता। अरे हमको छूने का है जहाज, वो तो लटवे वालों का सर दर्द है। अपने को तो खाली 7 लाख जुगाड़ने का है और इंतजार करने का है ये इंडिया में कब आता बिकने को। बिल्कुल सब्र नहीं हो रहा मालूम मेरे को तो एकदम।
अच्छा और कुछ भी छपे सो है क्या जहाज के बारे में?
अरे हाउ है ना, ये देखो, वो जहाज को वो बनाते हैं, वो क्या फाइबर और क्या बोलते यार, मुंह पे नहीं आ रहा, वो डुरालुमिनियम से। हाँ
है क्या बोले कि कौन सा मिलेनियम से?
अरे अम्मा मिलेनी ही यार, वो डुरालुमिनियम। वो देख, जहाज को उड़ाने के लिए एक छोटी पट्टी ना अपन को, उसके लिए घर की छत से काम चला लेते हैं। वो ओनर थोड़ी गिच्चिया करता, पर उसको भी जहाज में घुमा दिया तो खामोश बैठता हूँ। ठीक है, देख जहाज में वैसे 2 इंजन रहते, पर उड़ता खाली एक से। खाली टेक ऑफ के टाइम पे धोने की जरूरत पड़ती है अपन को।
अरे ये मस्त है ना यारो, एक इंजन से उड़ता तो पेट्रोल भी बचता अपने को। भाईगन पेट्रोल के रेट आजकल क्या चल रहा? 108 रुपए लीटर हो रहा पेट्रोल। चलो इसी बहाने अपन लोग पेट्रोल पंप का मूवी देख लेते हैं। पूछो कहीं को कि अपने मर्सिडीज में खाली बारिश गिरे बाद ऑयलिंग होती।
अरे तुम चुप करो जी, पूरा सुनो तो पहले। और हाँ, आइए अपनी साइकिल को मर्सिडीज नको बोला करो। अरे मर्सिडीज वाले सुने तो नंगा दौड़ा के मारते तुम्हें।
अरे देखो यारो, मेरे लिए तो वो टूटी साइकिल मर्सिडीज कम नहीं है। तुम अपने जहाज के बारे में बोलो यारो आगे।
हाँ तो सुनो, देख जहाज में सेफ्टी के लिए मस्त इंतजाम है कहते। कोई भी एक्सीडेंट हुए तो सीट आपको पैराशूट के साथ बाहर फेंक देती।
अरे ये जबरदस्त है। अच्छा अच्छा, अपने को ये जहाज का इंश्योरेंस तो रहता ना, कैसे तो लॉस तो नहीं होता? क्या बात है यारो।
है ना। अरे बेग, आज तो भी थोड़ा जल्दी रेडी होना था ना। ये लेडीज लोग का क्या तो भी सीन रहता है, इतनी देर इनको रेडी होने को। अरे इतने में चिड़िया दाना चुग के अंडे भी दे देती। अरे मैडम, अरे तुम्हारा मेकअप किसी को नजर नहीं आता जी नीचे से। अपन शहर का खाली एक राउंड मार के आ जाते 1 घंटे में।
पापा पापा, मैं तैयार हो गया पापा।
अरे मास्टर सलीम, ये बस्ता कहीं को टंगा। अरे तुम्हारे स्कूल में इतनी जगह नहीं रहती कि अपन अपना जहाज लैंड करे। मैं क्या बोलता, आज छुट्टी मार लो, खाली घर पे बैठो। हाँ, जाके अपनी अम्मी को लेके आओ, जरा जल्दी लेके आओ, जाओ। अरे बेगम, अरे अपन अपना जहाज फिर कभी दिखा देंगे यार। वो आज तो अपने जहाज का खाली फैमिली ट्रिप है। शहर का एक राउंड मार के 1 घंटे में आ जाते
अरे
वापस।
अरे, काई को गला काट रही जी। ऐसे भी कौन सा घुमाने लेके जाते हैं, साल में कभी 1-2 बार लेके जाते हैं। तो आप अच्छे कपड़े भी नहीं पहना क्या? वो सब छोड़ो, हम उधर से जा रहे तो सुशीला के घर भी होके आते। उसको 5वां बच्चा हुए सो हाल चाल पूछ लेते जरा।
अरे मैं बोला ना, रिश्तेदारों को अपना अपना जहाज फिर कभी दिखा देंगे। आज तो शहर का खाली एक राउंड मार के 1 घंटे में आ जाएंगे ना।
अरे अरे, काई को गला फाट रही जी। वैसे भी कौन सा घुमाने लेके जाते, साल में कभी 1-2 बार लेके जाते। तो अब अच्छे कपड़े भी नहीं पहना क्या? हम उधर से जा रहे ना, ये सब छोड़ो, हम उधर से जा रहे ना, सुशीला के घर भी होके आते। उसको 5वां बच्चा हुए सो हाल चाल पूछ लेते जरा।
अरे बेगम, रिश्तेदारों को अपना अपना जहाज फिर कभी दिखा देंगे यारो। आज तो अपना जहाज का खाली फैमिली ट्रिप है। शहर का एक राउंड मार के 1 घंटे में आ जाते हैं। उसका चार मीनार के ऊपर से जाएंगे अपन।
अब्बा, मैं तो फिल्म का भी प्लान बनाई थी, जुम्मा है, थिएटर में अच्छी फिल्म होगी।
अरे बेगम, थिएटर में गाड़ी पार्क करने कोई जगह नहीं रहती अपन को। ये अपन अपना जहाज कहाँ से पार्क करते बोलो? और ऊपर से थिएटर की छत भी टिन की रहती, वरना वही कहीं लगा देते थे ना अपन। फिल्म कभी और देख लेंगे ना।
कहने दो जी, आप पूरे बहाने हैं आपके। मालूम मेरे को सब कुछ। जहाज को ऑफिस लेके जाते और डेली वो सुलेखा को घर छोड़ के आता, सब मालूम। हाँ,
अरे अरे रे बेगम, वो बेचारी तुम्हारी क्या बिगाड़ी यारो? हाँ, अब मूड खराब ना करो, जल्दी बैठो। पहली बार उड़ने जा रहा है हमारा जहाज। अच्छे मूड से उड़ाने दो और उड़ो, ठीक है? ये बैगन की बाटा नको करो अभी।
पापा पापा, मैं कहाँ बैठना? यहाँ तो सिर्फ 2 सीट है।
अरे तुम अपनी अम्मी के गोद में बैठो जी। कौन मैं मैकेनिक से जाके एक्स्ट्रा बढ़ाने वाले तुम?
क्या हुआ जी? स्टार्ट करने को नहीं हो रहा?
क्या कोशिश तो कर रहा हूं मैं।
कंपनी वालों को एक बार स्टार्ट करके दिखाना था। खाली ट्रक पे लाके क्रेन से छत पे चढ़ा। वो रहा किताब, उसमें देखो जरा, कुछ रहता है इसके बारे में।
पापा, रिंकी के पापा का स्कूटर जब स्टार्ट नहीं होता ना, तो वो उसको टेढ़ा करके स्टार्ट करते हैं। आप भी करो ना।
अरे हाउ चोक तो लगाना भूल गया मैं। लो अब स्टार्ट होता।
जरा सुनो, बहुत तेज चल। कुछ थोड़ा हल्लो चलाओ जी।
अरे बेगम, ये साइकिल नहीं होती। अरे 7 लाख का हवाई जहाज है, हवाई जहाज। हल्लू हल्लू साइकिल चलता थी, ये जहाज है। अरे अरे वो देखो नीचे तुम्हारे अम्मा बाबा का घर। अरे हमारे फादर इन लॉ को देखो, चड्डी पहने से छत पे लाल मिर्चियां सुखा रहे शायद। ऊपर से सलाम बोलूं क्या उनको?
पापा, वो देखो मामा जी भी बैठे हैं दीवार के पीछे। नाना जी से छुपकर नॉवल पढ़ रहे शायद।
अरे कितनी बार बोले सारे साहब को कि नॉवल वगैरह छोड़ के काम की किताब पढ़ो। अरे मेरे को नहीं लगता इस बार भी हाई स्कूल पास करते हैं उन्होंने।
चुप करो जी, आपको तो काली बहाना हो ना एक मेरे भाई को डांटने का।
अब हरकताई सहती है तो क्या करना भाई?
अच्छा, ये सब हम इधर से जा रहे हैं ना, तो जरा फातिमा बाजी के घर की तरफ चलते हैं ना। जीजू भी घर पे रहते हैं आज।
अरे जरा सब्र रखो बेगम, जाएंगे सबके घर जाएंगे, ठीक है? अगले संडे को सबके घर जाएंगे। आज ये जहाज का एवरेज वगैरह देख लेंगे। अरे मालूम पड़ा कि कल रास्ते में पेट्रोल खत्म हो गया तो सड़क पे लैंड करना पड़ता अपन को।
हाँ, देखते कितना याद रहता अगले संडे तक।
अरे वो देखो नीचे हसन जा रहा शायद, अपना दादा की साइकिल पे सब्जी मंडी को जा रहा शायद। ओ हसन भाई, अरे ऊपर देखो। ओ हसन भाई, ओ।
अरे, शांत हो जाओ जी। पूरा शहर देख रहा है आपको। ऐसा गला फड़ते कोई तो भी। सारे चिड़िया कौवे जमा हो जाते जहाज के आसपास। शांत हो जाओ।
हाउ, सलाह के लिए शुक्रिया।
पापा वो देखो कितनी पतंगे उड़ रही है। एक पतंग तोड़ के दो ना पापा।
अरे नहीं, हाथ खिड़की से नहीं निकालना। जहाज से हाथ पाँव बाहर नहीं निकलते, नहीं तो एक्सीडेंट हो जाता।
एक दो पतंग दो पापा, एक दो पतंग।
अरे नहीं यारो, नहीं बोला ना, नहीं।
अरे क्या हुआ भाई, ऐसे बैठे बैठे नई नई काई को चिल्ला ले रहे? जहाज नहीं खरीद रहे क्या?
कुछ नहीं क्या बोले तुम?
मैं बोल रहा था कि अपने को ये जहाज का इंश्योरेंस रहता ना कैसा भी?
अरे हाई यारो, बिल्कुल रहता। साइकिल थोड़ी है, देख इंश्योरेंस तो करवा नहीं पड़ता कैसा भी।
हाउ करा लेंगे, इतनी महंगी चीज है अपनी, चोरी वगैरह का भी डर रहता आजकल।
अरे हसन भाई, मेरे को लग रहा है ये जहाज को लेके थोड़ा वो एयर एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन वाले थोड़ा परेशान रहते।
एयर एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन कई को परेशान रहते अब्दुल भाई?
अरे देखो वो ऐसा की, देख जहाज सस्ते हुए बाद सब लोग मार्जिन वगैरह छोड़ के जहाज को खरीद लेते, उससे फिर ऊपर आसमान में ट्रैफिक हो जाता होते, फिर ऊपर भी ट्रैफिक सिग्नल और लगाना पड़ता। अरे कोई ट्रैफिक सिग्नल छोड़ के बाहर ट्रैफिक पुलिस वाला उसको बाइक पे थोड़ी पकड़ता। अरे वो ट्रैफिक पुलिस वाले को तो एक जहाज होना ना उसको।
एकदम सही बोले तुम। ऐसा तो खर्चा तो फिर एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन का भी बढ़ता। पर उनकी कौन सोचते। मैं तो फिक्स कर लिया अपना कि पैसे कहाँ से लाने का है।
क्या हिसाब लगा लिए तुम मन में?
अरे देखो भाई, अगर मार्केट में ऐसा कोई जहाज आ रहा तो मैं तो ले रहा हूँ एक। 7 लाख में वैसे भी क्या आता आजकल, छोटे मोटे गाड़ियां आते मारुति सुजुकी जैसे, और गवर्नमेंट के लिए 7 लाख महीने रखते।
मतलब नहीं, क्या बोलना चाह रहे तुम कि वो जहाज वो गवर्नमेंट के पैसे से लेते हैं और वो कैसा होता?
अरे भाई आपको तो मालूम ही है ना, मेरी साइकिल जिसको आप मर्सिडीज बोलते हैं वो मेरे दादू की है, एंटीक पीस है बिल्कुल। तो आर्कोलॉजी वाले, मालूम नार्कोलॉजी वाले?
हाउ मालूम।
तो आर्कोलॉजी वाले हाथ धो के पीछे पड़े हुए उसके।
वो कई को हसन भाई?
अरे तुम्हारे को तुम सारे एरिया को मालूम है जी। 1939 में जो इलेक्शन हुए थे देखो, तब कांग्रेस के बड़े बड़े नेता इसी साइकिल पे फिरे सो हैं कन्विंस करने को। मेरे दादा भी कांग्रेस के बड़े मेंबर थे। तो बोलो फिर हुई ना एकदम एंटीक पीस। अब मैं गवर्नमेंट को जाके बोलता हूँ कि ये इसको नेशनल म्यूजियम को देने का है, और बदले में मुझे कुछ भी देना चाह रहे तो कुछ भी प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। वैसे भी मैं दान दहेज तो नहीं मानता, इसलिए अपनी साइकिल फोकट में तो नहीं दे रहा हूँ उनको। सरकार की भी क्या इज्जत रह जाती फिर। लोग खाली पीली बातें करते, सरकार एक साइकिल की कीमत भी नहीं दे सकी, खाली 10 लाख रुपए है ना।
10 लाख रुपए? अरे इतनी पैसा का क्या करते यार हो तुम? अरे तुम्हारा जहाज तो खाली 7 लाख में आ जाता ना।
अरे हाउ यार, और जहाज तो आ जाता, फिर पेट्रोल को पैसे कौन देते? तुम देते पेट्रोल को पैसे? 2-3 साल के पेट्रोल का जुगाड़ भी कर लेता हूँ साथ में ही।
क्या बात है यारो, तुम्हारा जुगाड़ हो गया समझो। अब मेरी साइकिल कौन खरीदते बोलो? वो खाली 32 साल पुरानी है। तुम्हारे तरह इलेक्शन वगैरह में तो नहीं, पर दंगे वंगे हुए देखो, वो तरफ वो 15 दिन थाने में पड़े सो थी।
अरे अच्छा, वो देखेंगे बाद में, लेकिन मैं क्या बोल रहा हूँ अब्दुल भाई, आजकल रोड पे कितने एक्सीडेंट हो रहे की, लोग पी के चलाते। अब अगर ऐसे जहाज उड़ाए तो बैगन खुद तो मरते, दूसरों को भी मारते।
हाँ यारो, ये तो बिल्कुल सही बोले तुम। अरे पर एक जबरदस्त आइडिया है मेरे को, बोलूं क्या?
हाँ बोलो।
तो सुनो, देख साइंस इतनी तरक्की करी ना, तो एक मशीन और हैंडल के बाजू फिट करना पड़ता अपन को, जो सूंघ के पता कर ले ड्राइवर पी के रखा सो कि नहीं। ऐसा जहाज में घुसते के साथ ही कंप्यूटर वार्निंग देना मालूम, नशा उतरने के बाद जहाज में बैठे।
हाँ बढ़िया आइडिया है। अल्लू साइंटिस्ट हो जा रहे तुम भी अब्दुल भाई।
इसको सूचित किया कि हमारा जहाज बठिंडा पहुंच गया। आपसे गुजारिश है, कुछ पेटी बाहर का तापमान 25 डिग्री सेल्सियस है और हसन भाई, ओ हसन भाई, ये लीजिए चाय, बहुत आसमान में उड़, अब थोड़ा धरती पे चलो। और आप सलमान कितनी देर से बस्ता टांग के खड़े सोए, आज भी स्कूल से देर हो जाता, उन्होंने आपकी साइकिल भी चमका दिए, अब उसको ही जहाज समझ के काम में जाओ, चलो निकलो।
अरे 10 बज रहे, अम्मा फिर से लेट हो जाता हूँ मैं। ये अखबार वाले भी छाप क्या?
अरे हाँ भाई, ऐसे न्यूज तो डेली आते पेपर में। गाड़ियां पानी से चलते, हवा में चलते, बैगन से चलते, क्या है कि कब होता ये सब। हम दादा नाना बन जाएंगे तब तक।
अरे हमरा भी ये पढ़ के खाली पुलाव बना खा रहे जी भाई। तुम्हारे को तो भी ऑफिस को देर हो रही होगी ना।
आओ जा रहा हूँ, चाय तो पी लूं। भाभी इतने प्यार से बना के तो मैं अपनी मर्सिडीज बेचने वाला था। मैं उसका मुकाबला कोई जहाज कर सकता क्या भला? ना पेट्रोल लगता ना लाइसेंस। अरे भाभी आपकी चाय जबरदस्त है एकदम, मालूम।
पापा पापा जल्दी करो, पापा आज फिर स्कूल में।
अरे ठहरो जी, आ रू मैं, मेरे को तो रेडी होने दो पहले, ठहरो।
Thank you for being a lovely audience. I hope you enjoy this light-hearted conversation between Abdul and Hassan of owning a private jet. Now I would like to introduce cast and crew of play. The script has been written by K. Mishra and adapted into Hyderabadi Hindi by Prajwal Sharma. Actors: Farah played by Sindhuja, Hassan played by Prajwal Sharma, Usman played by Devika Das, and played by Satyajit. Music was given by Padmashri. And the play has been directed by yours truly, Devika, from Navrasa, the NB. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Devika and the crew. We now reassemble. So this was nice, easy on the eye, and we could only hear what was going on. Thank you so much. We now reassemble after lunch at 2 o'clock for the next session. Thank you, NRB. Thank you, Devika. Thank you, the tech team of HLF. See you guys shortly.
We are off air.
Thank you so much.
Devika, you had some.
Thank you.